Good afternoon and welcome to the Board of Commissioners work session on Tuesday, September 12th. We are beginning with a presentation about Proposition 123, which is housing funding from the state. And I'm hoping Ashley's online.
Yep, she is.
Can we maybe turn this on?
We need to let staff know the traffic isn't that bad.
It's okay.
It's not bad at all coming
No,
in.
I know.
Am I on the big screen yet?
Yeah, but you can start anyway. Oh my God.
All right, I'm gonna get water while we're fixing.
Oh, really good.
Does anybody have their computer open?
Maybe mine's on. Mine may
Maybe
be
mine's
on.
on, mine maybe mine's on, mine maybe mine's on.
My God.
Mine maybe mine's on.
My God. Apologies. Oh, no, now John's got it. We're gonna hear your laugh for the rest of the day. You don't hear that echoing?
I'm not even logged in.
You are muted.
Okay, I already muted ours, but we need it to be live because otherwise
I'm not logged in.
I just turned my sound completely off.
John?
I'm not logged in.
No.
Is it the microphone schedule, is it that big?
No, it's not even joined with audio. So
Okay, can we
Francie,
give it another try?
I have to ask you, this is very important.
It's a test.
How was your zucchini sour cherry
Ashley,
bread?
can you hear us?
Your zucchini sour cherry
Ashley,
bread.
can you hear
I
us?
froze it all, has it good? But I made a cake. I'll tell you that.
Okay, can you try and
I'm gonna recommend that we.
unmute it?
For what it's worth, the speaker laptop is not muted.
So much
I
now.
made a chocolate cake full of cherries
Nobody knows how to do it.
made with cocoa and so much zucchini, you can't believe it. And so we had somebody over for lunch, our cousin over for lunch. So we each had a piece. Well, actually, our cousin had two. Then I went right to my son's house, who has the younger kids, and said, "Here, this is for you. We don't want this in our house."
Oh, that sounds really good.
Ashley, can you hear the Picken County Chambers? And do you have all of your microphones or any of your monitors muted?
That is a change.
Go ahead and who else is on?
Are we?
It's gotta be Ashley's then.
I can't hear you all if you're trying to speak.
Do you have us turned up, Andorra?
No, so this is assumed, like it has nothing to do.
Beginning to be.
Absurd.
Yeah.
We've been doing this now for years.
So Ashley
She's
also,
unmuted. Yeah.
I understand she's unmuted, but she also cannot have like her computer in front of her playing it back. So she either needs to call in and mute her computer, or she needs to use her computer with a headset.
Well, I'm gonna go to the restroom while we're,
I don't
Okay.
know how she's
then I'm gonna
doing
go
it.
wash my car and
Just-
get
No, it's
my nails
just a
done.
regular Zoom, and I mean, this doesn't have, it's just a sound, like here, cause you can hear.
I know,
bounces
but if
back, so it's
everybody
not
else
her.
said that they've.
Hey Ashley, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you, Rich.
Yeah, they're trying to get straightened out. If you go online, you can hear them.
Can you mute this? That needs.
Yeah, I'm sure you can see this as well. The speaker laptop is not muted. I don't know if that's sending them feedback from the room.
Is the speaker?
There's like a speaker laptop. You can see it on the Zoom.
I
And I think it's the one that's over in the empty chair.
Oh, yeah, I see that.
And it's not muted, so I wonder if they're getting.
She's going over there now to.
Audio's not connected
Look
on
at
this
that.
one.
Oh, here you go. Hold on.
Did you find it?
I got it.
It is that TV?
I can hear the speakers out of that TV.
He's
so
just
that
turning
would
the
make
speaker down
sense
for the
because
TV.
So you usually gotta mute your computer.
That's way better.
Rather than the sound on your computer, so I don't know.
Yeah.
Is that it?
No, I think so. can you hear us? Ashley, go ahead. Well, no. we're all muting.
She doesn't know where to go.
The host would like you to unmute your microphone. You can press star 6 to unmute.
I don't think Joe's going to want to talk.
You are unmuted.
Ashley, can you hear us?
Yeah.
Okay. I guess it was that TV. I don't know how that got turned up.
Oh, maybe.
They were using it for
When
something.
you turn it on, maybe.
Yeah, it has like a mute ring.
I think for actions or for
It's
their-
turned down.
So are we good?
I think you're ready to roll, Ashley. Take it away.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Ashley Pearl. I'm the Community Resiliency Manager for Picking County. And apologies that I can't be there in person. I'm recovering from a cold, much like many community, so I didn't want to infect anybody. I'm here to chat about Proposition 123, also known as Prop 123, and ultimately ask the board if you're interested in filing a commitment on behalf of Picken County. So I'll go over the background of Proposition 123, and then really it's just a chance for you all to talk amongst yourselves. And then I would also love to take back a list of questions. Fair warning, you may have questions today that I definitely cannot answer, but we do have a pretty good line with the state right now on getting our questions answered. So that's the other thing I'd like to walk away from this today with, is any additional questions that you want me to pass on to the state or where we go from here. I'm going to share slides that the state put together because this is their program and I think they describe it best. So what is Proposition 123? It's a proposition that was passed by Colorado voters in November of 2022. It establishes a new fund called the State Affordable Housing Fund. And through that money that's collected, it provides money for housing initiatives to municipalities, counties like ourselves, tribal governments, for and nonprofit developers, housing authorities, nonprofit agencies, and a small host of other entities doing housing work around the state. So one of the key things that we're going to talk about today is it does require that the municipalities and counties make a commitment, so that you know if you were to make a commitment, this is kind of the group that you would be joining. I think there's more joining every day. It has some traction right now. And then most recently, locally, I know that the town of Snowmass Village just signed on as of last week. So they're going to be added to the Rural Resort Municipalities group there soon. So what is a state affordable housing fund? I think this slide does it best. The income tax revenue comes in, and then 60% of it goes to OEDIT, and then OEDIT is using CHAFA as their vehicle to get the money out. And then 40% of it goes to DOLA, and then DOLA is using the Department of Housing and the Department of Local Government to get their portion out. You can see some forecasts on the screen of how much they expect to bring in. This coming year, they're anticipating around 160 million, and then next year, 318 million. I don't know all the background on how those are calculated, but that's just what they say. What you can see here in this slide is that how the state is really positioning this is local governments are at the base of the tree. And by making a commitment, we then unlock funding and access to these funding streams for other folks as well as for our own local government. So we're kind of the gatekeepers right now. Whether or not we make a commitment does impact not just our access to these programs, but the access for other entities in the community. So I've heard from entities such as CORE, the Community Office for Resource Efficiency, and some of our private developers that they are interested in taking advantage of some of these funds when they become available, but they are aware that Picken County would need to make that commitment first. So folks are curious what we're going to do, because there are these 6 programs out there where we kind of unlock the funding through our commitment. So a little bit more about the programs. So these are the programs that are going to be operated by DOLA. So most of their money, 50% of the money, is going to go to affordable home ownership programs. 45% is going to go towards programs around homelessness and getting individuals out of homelessness. And then a small portion is going to go towards a local planning grant that they're going to run. And then on the CHAPA side, they're going to run 3 different programs. One is a land banking program. Another one is an equity investment program. And the third is a concessionary debt program. Fair warning, I do not have much more than what's on the screen about each of these programs. They haven't published guidelines for the programs yet. We don't know if there's matching requirements. We don't know a ton about the programs and how they'll work. We just kind of know this high level narrative. The land banking program did go live last month, so we know a little bit more about that, but not a ton about the others. Here are all the programs displayed slightly differently, and I think it's important to pay attention here. The programs on the top are from CHAFA. The programs in the blue are from Department of Housing, and then you see the AMI numbers across the top. So right now, a number of these programs are set to serve these AMIs listed on the screen. And what's really important for us is that there is this thing called a rural resort petition that we can take advantage of if we, let's say we want to apply for the concessionary debt program, for example. And right now it's listed at 80% AMI. Since it's a program through CHAFA, there is a rural resort petition that we could participate in and petition that if we were to receive funding from that program, we could use it at a higher AMI level. That petition process for all that has not been figured out yet. And so if we were to make a commitment, we would be invited to the table to have that conversation further with CHAFA on what those programs are going to look like. Something to note is that the DOH programs, the ones in blue down here, affordable home and ownership, et cetera, those do not have a rural resort petition opportunity. So the AMI that's listed is the AMI that we have. Again, here's the 3 different programs laid out, that local government commitment at the base. I just have a couple more slides and then we're going to discuss. So that's the programming. In order to access the programming, Pickens County would need to make a commitment to build or create new affordable housing over the next 3 years. The way that the state is doing this, and this is all written into the legislation, so it does not have any wiggle room or flexibility, the state establishes a baseline for every community. They do that using nationally available data like the median income and household income distribution. And then they set a baseline number for what a community currently has for affordable housing units. And then they say that our commitment is to build 9% of that over the next 3 years. And so that would they calculate our baseline for us, and then they tell us what 9% is, and then we file the commitment. So now I'm going to switch back to my slides because now I have some more relevant content for us here locally. So here we are. So our Pickens County number that DOLA calculated for us, they say we have 184 existing affordable housing units.
That's interesting.
That is probably not actually what we have on the ground, according to our numbers, but that's what their calculation that's legislatively mandated tells them we have. 184 existing units, 9% of that is 17. So if we were to make the Prop 123 commitment, we would commit to 17 new or converted affordable housing units in the next 3 years. So 2024, 2025, and then by the end of 2026 is when we would need to meet the commitment.
So I have a question about that, Ashley.
Yeah, go for it.
It just seems like the more affordable housing units you already have, the more you have to build. That doesn't make any sense to me. That seems completely backward to what they're trying to do. Like if we had no affordable housing units, well,
We'd have to
9% of 0 is 0. You wouldn't have to build anything, and It just doesn't make any sense. Like, the more you've done, the more they expect you to do. Is that the way you read it, Ashley?
Yeah.
I do read it that way. However, the way they calculate baseline is completely inconsistent with the amount of units we actually have.
Right.
So it's based on our population, our area median income. And so 184 existing units is actually far below what we actually have.
Definitely.
So in this particular regard, their calculations help us a great deal, because if they actually came in and counted our real affordable housing units on the ground, it's much higher, and we would have to then, you're right, Francie, build much more. So yes, I see your point.
Wait, is that 184 just in unincorporated Pickens County? I mean, are we talking, we're now responsible for with the city of Aspen and Snowmass Village and Basalt? Do we know how they
that's
calculated
only,
that?
everything here is only unincorporated Pickens County. And when we get into meeting the commitment, the new units can be in incorporated Pickens County or actually even outside of Pickens County altogether,
So
which
you're,
we'll talk about here in a second.
okay, but you're saying we have more than 184 existing units in unincorporated Pickens County?
You know, I haven't done the math.
We don't
but
have
when
that
you
many in
look at all
unincorporated
of
Pickens
our-
County.
We have Hunter Long House, whatever that place is.
That's in the city.
It's on our property.
But it's still in
So
the city.
just for, you know, if we were to count all the units that Pickens County had played a part in creating, this number would be much higher. So that would be include units within the city boundaries and such. I think what they're trying to count is units just in the unincorporated areas outside of municipal boundaries. We may be close, depending on how they're counting the deed restrictions there. Certainly, most of our units are
And the trailer
within
courts.
Yeah, exactly. So if you're looking at, you know, Woody Creek and Aspen Village and everywhere that has some kind of
Lazy
deed
Glen.
restriction applied, Lazy Glen,
Lazy Glen, yeah.
we're probably not
Yeah,
too
it's
far
closer.
off,
Got
but
it.
you know, we're roughly of the APSHA inventory. I think last time we looked, we're roughly 48% that we got through either land use exactions or such back in the day. Some of the older units. So they're
48% of APCHA housing?
Of 3,000 and some housing units?
Well, that's a
Yeah,
lot
that's
more
correct.
than 184.
Yeah.
Yes, and so this
I don't see that.
calculation is very, very favorable for us meeting the grant requirements
no
under.
kidding.
Yeah.
And I think it also has to qualify that it's less than 30% of their occupants' income. So it only will count, I think, for affordable housing if it's less than 30%. Otherwise, it may be deed restricted, it might be something, but if I'm not mistaken, Ashley, isn't one of the requirements that it's,
The new housing units
Yes,
have to qualify at 30%.
Not one of the requirements for how we make our commitment, but one of the requirements on how they calculate the baseline is that the occupant, that the price of the house or the price of the rental does not represent more than 30% of the
Right.
occupant's
okay.
income, which again, this is all based on national data and dictated legislatively. So our 184 may be, like John is saying, slightly close to what we have in reality in unincorporated, but for many communities, this is far off the reality. For example, the city of Aspen has a similar number, and we know that if out of all the APSHA units, if we're only claiming 184, then the rest of them would be in the city of Aspen and Snowmass, and those municipalities have similarly low numbers. So I do think this is one of the places where Prop 123 is actually favorable, at least right now, for rural resort communities, because it is definitely undercounting our existing circumstances.
Uh-huh. So it's one of the ways that they're helping the people who are already doing affordable housing not be under such a strict obligation.
They're kind of fudging the
Yeah, and
numbers.
I'm not entirely sure if the intention of the legislation was to do that, but that's certainly the way it's playing out.
Hey, Ashley,
And-
I have a question.
Go ahead.
So I'm perfectly happy to accept 17 new converted units, and I think we should take this challenge. If we make a commitment to 17 units, I think that's probably within our grasp. My concern is if somebody at DOLA or else whoever recalculates and says, oh, no, wait a minute, you had 500 units and you need to build 50, what assurance do we have that they're going to stick to their side of the bargain?
We don't.
Great question. The way that the baseline number is calculated is written into the Proposition 123 legislation that was passed by voters. So DOLA has been very clear that they know that communities may have an actual on-the-ground reality different number, but they are beholden to the legislation. And if we use their tool that they have online, and the tool that I used came out with 184 new units with 17 new, that is what we filed our commitment on, and that is what we are held to. And it's in the legislation, so they can't move on it, and we can't really move on it either.
I'm
Because
comfortable with
other
that.
communities are trying to petition for a lower number, and there's no way to do that because the legislation is written as such.
Right. I'd be comfortable getting on board with this. Of course, we're going to confirm everything with DOLA, and it will take a while for something like this to come together. But I think it's a great thing, and we should go for it.
Thanks, Greg. I have a couple of questions, Ashley. How long do we have?
And I have a couple more. Yeah. I've got
Well,
a
this
couple
is
more slides that will
particularly
probably
on,
answer some of
okay.
your other questions.
This is on this slide. I'll just ask this one for now. So what's the timeline for finishing a project of 17 units under this program?
26?
It only has to be permitted by December 31st, 2026.
2026?
They have to be permitted but not built.
Okay, thanks. You can carry on. I think we could pull that off.
Something that is interesting, I'll just use that term, is that when we make our commitment, we are committing to 17 new or converted units, and that all 17 of those units would serve, if they're rental, people at or below 60% AMI, and if they're ownership units, at or below 100% AMI.
Yeah.
There's a caveat to that, which is if we apply for Prop 123 funding and that funding is for a higher AMI, so let's say we fill out the waiver and we get money for 120% AMI, and then we use that money to build that unit can serve a higher AMI, but our commitment that we would sign on to would be at these AMIs that are on the screen. It's a little bit tricky there, but it's just something to note.
What is our current AMI here?
100% of AMI for one person is around $96,000. Don't totally quote me on that, but it's right
Okay.
around there.
All right, thanks.
Don't qualify.
None of us qualify.
So if
I'm
I've done
under.
some thought around if we make this commitment, how would we go about meeting it? We need to do a lot more thought here, but this was just a cursory review. So we could use either a regional buy-down program like we've been talking about, or our internal shared equity deed restriction program to create new units out of existing free market. Anything that we do around, like, let's say CDOT builds their new housing and then they master lease us back some for rental, that would qualify as a new unit. And then there is the ability to partner on new developments. So the town of Snowmass Village is planning on building their draw site, which is kind of behind their existing town hall. They're talking about upwards of 60 new units. If we make an agreement ahead of time, we can sign on, we can use money, we can fund part of the draw site project, for example. And then if we make an agreement ahead of time, we can count units that are on a different project towards our commitment, even if those units are inside Picken County.
So if
So,
we
but
decided
we
to
would just
do,
have to-
if we had a
Go ahead.
partner down Valley, for instance, would we use their AMI? Or ours?
No, that
Has
it
to
would
be
still
built
have
in
to be
Picken
our
County.
AMI. But those units, if we made an agreement ahead of time that those are going to count towards our commitment, would count even though they're outside of Picken County.
They would count outside of Picken County? I thought they all had to be built within Picken County.
Unless we make agreements ahead of time with the partners to count some of the units outside of Picken County towards our commitment.
So we could
That's
do-
something I think we need more, that's not what I had heard. I think that's great, but that's counter to what I've heard, but.
I think a lot of these rules are still getting worked out at DOLA right now.
But I didn't understand Ashley's answer, partly because the acoustics are a little bit weird. But, so if we had a partner in Glenwood Springs and we built some units down there, we would still have to use our AMI for Pickens County?
If I'm understanding correctly, one, I don't think that level of detail has been fully worked out in the
Okay.
programming yet. As I understand it, what Ashley is saying is we would have to have an agreement between us and our partner entity, and I'd assume that agreement would also have to be approved by DOLA as far as how those units would count against our grant requirements, and we'd probably have an opportunity to discuss the AMI level at that point. One of the concerns is as the AMI drops, you're actually pulling people out of the program and making it harder to have people move in, right? And so, yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
And Ashley, did I get that correct?
You got that right. And the main thing is there's still a lot that the state has not said. And they are offering up that they're going to invite communities who have made the commitment to be part of the ongoing conversation to craft some of this. So I do think that would be one benefit of us committing is we would have a seat at the table to kind of inform how some of this might be laid out better. Another thing to consider, and this is kind of where staff is, I mean, I think we're looking at this as a relatively low risk item. So if we don't opt in, then Pickens County, us as the local government organization, and our nonprofits, our developers, and our local organizations, no access to the funding in unincorporated. If we don't opt in, but the city of Aspen does, then those located in the city of Aspen get that money, but not in unincorporated. And the same is true vice versa. So let's say the city of Aspen doesn't opt in, but we do, we would have unincorporated Pickens County covered, but not within the municipality boundaries. So if we were to make the commitment, we then get access to the funding for us and others. And if we achieve it, the only thing we get when we achieve it is the ability to make another 3-year commitment to go for funding again and build 9% more units again in the next 3-year period. If we were to make the commitment but then fall short of our commitment, the only risk that we run is that we're ineligible for funding in 2027. We could apply again for funding in 2028 if we wanted to make the commitment. The nice thing about this is there are no clawback provisions or kind of like related risks where they're going to take back money if we don't achieve our commitment. So I think a lot of these questions are really good ones that we want to get the answers to, but I think the commitment is a good faith effort to build more housing or to convert more housing. But in the end, falling short of the commitment has very few kind of risks associated with it. If we opt in, we get access to funding for us, for Pickens County. We open up access for funding for other agencies, businesses, families, individuals. We also gain the ability to participate in discussions with the state. And then it does open the door for us to have conversations with municipalities like Town of Snowmass Village about partnering on new housing development. For example, the draw site. If we're both committed, the opportunity for us to partner to build out the draw site is much more than if Snowmass is committed and we're not, because then they're very interested in just meeting their own commitment with their development, versus if we, can bring some money to the table or some partnership to the table, then we could also get some units out of that for our commitment. And it does bring the region together a little bit, which I think is one benefit of this. The last thing I'll say that I don't have a slide for is you may have heard in previous iterations that there was this requirement of a 90-day fast track of permitting. And that is not a requirement of our commitment in this 3-year period, but it will be for any community committing for 2027, 2028, and 2029. And so I do think that now is our time to make a commitment. So relatively small number of units, we do think there's a path forward. The risk of not achieving our commitment is relatively low, and then we can have access to the money. If we skip this commitment period and go for the next one, then we would also be committing, in addition to building new units, we would also be committing to having a 90-day fast track approval process in our community development department for any development that has 50% or more affordable housing as part of it. So just in case you had heard that as part of the legislation, that's not part of the commitment right now, but it will be for future iterations.
Okay.
Those are all the slides I have. I have 2 questions for you all, which is what questions do you have, which I know is a lot, and then where do you all stand on wanting to file a commitment or not on this. We do have to file before November 1st, and it's something that staff can do online. We don't need a signature or anything like that. We just need a nod of approval from the board.
Nancy?
Okay, yeah, Patty.
Yeah, so my biggest question was a way out. It sounds like we have some options and opportunities if things aren't working on their side or our side to get out of this. I think right now the benefits are worth entering into it with our eyes wide open. And at least I think what's really key is having a seat at the table, because there are so many unknowns about so many things. And I'd rather be part of it than watching from outside and not being able to make a difference. So I think I agree with Greg that we need to jump in, see where it takes us, and as long as we have the ability to jump out if it's taking us down the wrong path.
Greg, did you have further comments?
Nope.
I agree also. I definitely think we should opt in, and Kelly does too. She's texted me. She's not with us right now, but she is very much in favor. She had a few questions, which are right here. She wants to know if you know anything about OEDIT, but it doesn't sound like you do, the equity program. She's unclear as to what that would fund and what a tenant equity vehicle might be. And her other question is about the rural resort petition process, but that also sounds like it's being figured out. She thinks it's project-based on a project-to-project basis, but she's not clear about it. So those are her 2 questions. Well, no, there's one more, but if you want to deal with those 2 first.
Yeah, thank you, Francie. I did see those come through in an email. They have not put out any information from OEDIT about the tenant equity vehicle, so I'm equally awaiting some detailed information. And then they have only said that there will be a waiver process for rural resort communities, but not at all what it will look like.
Yeah.
They have said if we commit and we're a rural resort community, we'll be asked to participate in some conversations to craft what that waiver will look like. So we will have a say, if, relative to other communities who don't commit.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't see that she'd copy you on that, so. Okay. So, yes, let's do it.
I just joined. Thank you.
What?
That's Kelly.
Oh. Kelly, you're there. In one form or
Yeah,
another?
sorry I'm late. I just jumped on, and thank you for raising my question.
Okay. All right, so is that what you need from us, Ashley?
That is what I need. John, it sounds like we have direction to go ahead and file the commitment on behalf of Pickens County, and then we'll share that documentation out. And then as opportunities become available to participate, we'll keep you all up to speed. And then we have been offered a technical assistance session with Town of Stone Mountain Village, City of Aspen, and Town of Basalt. in a couple weeks. So I'll bring your questions, and if you come up with more in between now and then, please send them to me so I can bring all those questions to the TA session and hopefully get some more answers. And then we have a number of housing interactions with the board coming up over the next couple months. So we'll bring opportunities forward as they become available for you all. So thanks for the time today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks,
Sounds
Ashley.
good. Thank you so much, Ashley. Where's my agenda? Okay. The next item we have is Wendy
Hi, Wendy.
and Charlotte. Wendy is wanting to renew her service on Healthy Rivers and Streams, and we are so happy to hear that.
Thank you. You can sit there.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So, Healthy Rivers and Streams Board. We have Wendy renewing, wishing to renew. There's also another renewal, but he decided not to renew. Chuck Ogilvy has resigned.
Oh, wow.
So we have a vacancy there. But we, actually a couple of things have changed since I wrote this AIS. We have another applicant who's interested in Chuck's position. He lives in District 5. And we're also waiting on another, I believe Wendy has a recommendation that we're going to send him them an application and see how that goes. So, but Wendy's here and she wants to renew, so I'll let you all ask her some questions.
Thank you all for the opportunity.
I could ask a question, only to say thanks and welcome, and thanks for signing up. And I loved reading your application, and I'm glad you're so engaged and want to
keep going
and promote more engagement. I think it's great. So just thank you for that. I don't have any particular questions, but I'll think of some while we chat.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, I ditto what Greg said. We depend on people to volunteer for all of our different boards and councils, and we really appreciate the time and effort you put in. And I think this is one of our special boards. Not that they all aren't special, but the opportunity to do great things, and we have that funding mechanism, and so we're just going to see where the next couple of years take us.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, I agree. Thank you so much. Kelly, did you have comments?
No, not right now, Wendy. Thank you. I'd be curious to hear how your experience has been, what you think of the direction of the board, if there's things you would like to see differently.
Certainly, I can take a couple minutes and just share. One, it is a steep learning curve, so I think it's important to have the opportunity to have a second term, as it is certainly issues impacting water quantity and quality in our watershed, I think, are tantamount importance. I actually am really proud of this county, and as I did go to the Colorado Water Congress, not in the summer session but the winter, and I was really proud that this county had done this work. I gained an appreciation for that. I served on the scholarship committee and gave awards to the students, and I was really proud. They were meaningful scholarships that we're able to give to students who have a potential interest in water and this area. We also developed a new grant application process that helps our applicants. I had help with members Neff and Lemons. We had a subcommittee, and we looked at the process so that it would be apples to apples instead of different forms, different budget forms. So we put that together, and so now we will get apples to apples when we look at our grant applications. I did give a presentation on behalf of this board to another group of electeds, and again, I felt really proud proud. And there were several who came up and said, how did this happen? I said, talk to Pitkin County. This is, we also prepared and are ready to do it, but COVID slowed us down to talk to both Eagle County as well as Garfield County and remind them of the benefits they are deriving from this work. And so we do have that presentation. We have more to add to it that is in the other counties, and they are deriving the benefit. And so maybe they could consider an area that we'd like to get done. And we're preliminarily getting on the agenda for the Board of County Commissioners in both Garfield and Eagle counties to get that ball rolling. And so the communications team has prepared a presentation that we'll be able to give to them.
Great.
That's great.
Yeah.
On how to implement it through
In their
yeah.
counties, yes, so that we can share this benefit that has arisen.
Well, I think we're still the only county that has the sales
We
tax.
might be,
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
remember the San Miguel County approached us years ago when I was first on Healthy Rivers, and they were asking, how did you do this? And I think that this is something that if there was a template that could be shared throughout all the western slope counties at the least, or the QQ counties, however you want to break it down. But I think it could certainly go beyond that, and it'd be great if it did.
That's a good idea. Where are my Lisa and Lisa? Write that
Lisa's
down.
there.
It was surprising when we were at the Wheeler Park, is that what it's called? The water park in Carbondale?
Yes.
And they were asking us for money, and considerably more money than Garfield County. And we were like, "Ooh, aren't we in Garfield County here?"
Yes.
Didn't we
Yes.
just cross the county line?
And we are beginning to see more and more projects that really benefit. And if you look at their location, they're not in Pitkin County. But because this is a watershed wide program, it really does benefit other counties. So I think that's good, but I also think, and I want to acknowledge our wonderful staff who are also joining us in our Lisa duo. So
Did you have more comments?
I think
we kind of
yeah.
interrupted you.
No, it's okay.
Well, I think everybody's been thrilled with your service, and
Oh, and I was just elected chair. I forgot.
Excellent.
there you go.
So are you going to initiate a speaker series or
Well,
a
that's
public
another
profile?
one. I would like a speaker series, and I had a crazy idea, but it hasn't gotten great. But I thought if we could get a reading group, that is a community-wide read on literature that reminds us of the importance of quantity and quality of our water. And so that was my other crazy idea, is that we would all be carrying under our arm some tome about the importance of our rivers, but also the speaker series I think would be very important. I think we've all kind of rested in our homes for a while, but now we're ready to get back out and do those kinds of things.
Explorer Books has they're always looking for authors to come. So if you
And
have
wouldn't that be a great idea?
Authors on water issues could certainly come and give a public lecture in a place like that, if not somewhere else. But I'm sure they would love to cooperate.
Yeah, that'd be
on
great.
that. I did want to ask, I'm always concerned about diversion to the Front Range. And when you hear about the water project, Senator Bennett brought it up the other night, and it didn't go over well at the dinner.
Yeah.
But he said, we're finally getting done this canal project on the Arkansas, which is going to allow more water to flow east to the farmers and the people who've wanted it and needed it as long as they've tried to grow things in dry, arid ground down there. And the implications is that it's more water that could possibly come from our watershed, certainly the Hunter Frying Pan and the Roaring Fork. And I don't hear many people talking about that. And I'm concerned because we just applied to be an outstanding watershed, but quantity is such an important part of water temperature and quality and dilution of pollutants and things like that, that it doesn't appear to me that we're looking at the big picture. And I think that's where Healthy Rivers could really keep people's minds on that and keep our focus on those issues. So I would love to see more on your part in that regard and would help.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah.
Greg, I did speak with some local fly fishing guides about our recent issue with the outstanding streams. And they agreed with you about the point is when we're looking at all these contaminants, heavy metals, et cetera, they should be definitely recording temperatures.
Yeah.
Because that is such an extreme factor in the life of our rivers and streams.
Yep, it makes a big difference, so.
Yeah.
And Lisa know all this.
Well, maybe that's something we can take on, we can change the rules, add to the rules.
That's right.
Yeah, so thanks again, it's good to see you.
Good to see
Thank you,
everybody.
Wendy,
Thank
for
you.
agreeing to serve again. I can't imagine that we won't all get.
I do have one more
Yes.
question, not necessarily for Wendy.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I'm having a little trouble hearing from the room. It gets a little garbly. Charlotte, can you remind, I know Healthy Rivers or Lisa have the bylaws have some differences about the district representations and distribution of location of members. And I just wonder where we're at with that, if we're complying with that, or if we have desire in trying to recruit from different parts of the county.
Right.
Yep.
I can answer that, Charlotte, if you want me to.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So the members, we have a 7-member board, and 5 are supposed to be picked from each of the commissioner districts if possible, but that hasn't been possible, in the last few years. And then we have the 2 Roaring Fork watershed representatives, which are Wendy and Kirsten Neff.
And there was a recent bylaw change that allowed watershed members to be elected chair, which is the only reason I can be chair.
Right.
Good thing we changed that rule.
Exactly.
And the current vacancy that is left by Chuck's resignation is District 5.
So get a Crystal resident in
So,
there.
but so is Bill Yoakum's also a watershed representative now?
He's not, and Andre is actually a District 5 as well, because they stick with what they were appointed at the time. So we actually have technically 3 District 5 members right now, and then Chris Wheatley and Chris Lemons are up valley.
Okay. Okay, so Chris Lemons is District 2, he's my neighbor, and then Chris Wheatley is at District 3 or 4?
Yeah, he's down by Aspen Village. Is that 3
4
or 4? Can't remember now with the little map, with the new map changes.
Yeah.
Are you Aspen
Okay.
Village?
Okay, thank you.
So if you know anybody even in the upper district,
That's Steve.
we're allowed to interview somebody like that, so.
Okay, I have had a chat with at least one person, so we'll see if they apply or not. Okay, thank you. And how long is the application open for?
Well, we actually closed it last week, I believe, but we're going to keep it open because we didn't have any more applicants at that time. So I'm going to gather whoever comes in here in the next week or so and try to schedule those on upcoming future agendas.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Wendy.
Thank you all very
Charlotte.
much. I appreciate serving.
Great. Take care.
Thank you.
And now we have Connie. I assume she's online somewhere. To give us she's right there in the room.
Hi,
With the third quarter budget supplemental requests.
Russ, I should have Kurt down and Brett Lowe joining. We're a little early, so they may not be on yet, but I can skip ahead and then come back to them. Just a moment while I load up the materials.
This is coming back to us tomorrow, right?
Yes, it is.
You know, we always like it when you're adding money to this. Right?
There is
I
a
know,
request that
I
adds
know.
money, yes. Okay, let's see, and Rosa, will you let me know when they hop on? Okay. We're going to go a little bit out of order on the supplemental request, since we're a bit ahead of schedule. And Kurt Dahl will be joining us for the public health request and Brett Loeb for the dispatch request. But let's just skip ahead and then we can circle back. So this would be page 22 of your board packet, the response capital campaign contribution. And this is something that the board already discussed at the June 20th BOCC meeting. Response was here to talk about their capital campaign, and the board agreed to contribute $250,000. So this supplemental request appropriates that money and then draws on the LATCF funding as a source that can be used for that. So this is just formalizing what the board, oh, let's see, I was going to share my screen.
What else can we use that fund for? What is that, or should I say, what is that fund restricted to use?
The LATCF is pretty broad. And I don't have all the details of it, but it's a lot less restrictive than the ARPA funding.
And how much do we have in
My understanding, and Connie, correct me if I'm wrong, is it's along the same lines of payment in lieu of taxes, PIL payments that come through the feds, which is really serves as almost a completely general revenue versus the ARPA funds, which do have more restrictions on them.
And it is, I see the fund balance on here, but that's general fund. So what, do we have a number for the fund itself, for the LATCF fund? TCF fund?
I'm trying to remember, I know that Ashley has been tracking it and Gabriel also.
You could just let me know tomorrow, because I want to see where we are in that fund, what opportunities we might have and how that gets replenished, and because that's kind of a new one. So we never really have talked about that specifically till, I think, this year, pretty much. Keep going to it.
It was part of the COVID relief package, yeah.
Yeah, so if we can just find out where the status of that is, that would be great. But
sure,
tomorrow or the next time.
Yeah, I'll bring it back tomorrow.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I'm supportive of doing this 215th, I think. We had a good discussion.
Can I answer Patty's question a little bit?
Sure.
Okay. Patty, these funds came in after much of the COVID relief funds as a way to sort of balance out rural and tribal areas, and how there was sort of an inequity in the distributions to like PILT counties versus like urban areas. So this money like came in later than the original distributions.
Okay, I'd like to know how much is in the fund and where we've been using it, so.
Yeah, we'll bring that
Okay,
back.
thanks, Kelly.
The next request is the Coroner Lead Investigator FTE, and this one came to the board on July 11th, and the board was in agreement with that. The Coroner's Office presented the request to help with their continued growth in caseload. It converts an already existing on-call position into a year-round ongoing position. So this budget request just formalizes that action and appropriates the budget for it.
It is a little disturbing to think that we need more coroners as compared to a little while ago. Is that a reflection of our age?
A lot of it, too, is the reflection of the paperwork that's now involved and the data tracking and et cetera.
Increased paperwork, you mean?
Yeah.
And increased training and regulations, but at the same time, it's also a reflection on the employment environment where in the past we may have been able to retain more on-call deputy coroners, and that's just not sustainable anymore.
Right, I get that. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so moving on to the next one, which is the Employee Deed Restricted Housing Program. And this program was established in 2017 in the Housing Fund using housing impact fee dollars and has been a very successful program up to this point. The board just recently has agreed to make some changes in the parameters of what's allowable under this program. And with those changes, it doesn't fit very well anymore within the housing impact fee restrictions. So this supplemental request is the behind-the-scenes budget part of what would be necessary to move the deed restricted program out of the housing fund and into the capital fund. There are currently 10 units within this program. 9 of them were paid out of the housing fund. The most recent one in anticipation of this move was paid out of the capital fund. We need to pay back the housing fund, and that's about $2 million. And the way this request is written is to pay that $2 million out of unassigned general fund balance. Drawing down general fund balance, plus also appropriating $800,000 in the capital fund for any additional purchases in 2023, plus if there were any opportunities that came up where the county needed to buy back a unit. So this funding would be out of the general fund. There is also the possibility of taking that out of the $5 million appropriated for housing also. So that's a question for the board of which option the board would prefer.
And I may put a little more context on that last option because one of the things that we talked about when looking at this is there's no expenditure happening here on new units or housing. This is really keeping our funds whole. And so it's a little bit like taking money from one pocket and putting it into another pocket. It's just that other pocket is more restrictive on what you can pull the money back out to spend on. It's just housing. And so if the board chooses to pull from the $5 million, the full amount that's left will still be left for housing. It's just some of it will be in the housing fund and some of it will be in the general fund. As the appropriation is set now, which is a use of fund balance, it'd actually be adding that $2 million in appropriations to the $5 million existing, basically. So you'd have a total of $7 million plus whatever change. I can't do my math in my head right now for whatever reason. And so that's really the question for the board. If you want to keep it whole right now, you would just do this transfer out of the $5 million that's already been appropriated. And it's just moving between funds. The way it's set up now would actually add $2 million into the housing fund.
That's correct.
It's not $5 million anymore, though, is it? Didn't we give $200 million to APSO for 200? I mean, 200,000. I wish it were 200.
Yeah, it's not $5 million anymore. You're exactly right, Francie. We've spent down some of that funding, not a lot, but I just want to recognize this wouldn't be an expenditure out. You wouldn't have $2 million less to spend on housing. It would just be in different funds. Mm-hmm. Did I get that right, Connie?
Yes. If it were to stay in the general fund, it could also be used for other projects or other capital projects or microgrid or other.
The $2 million or the $5 million?
The $2 million.
Okay.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I'd rather take it out of the 5 and leave the general fund as it is for more flexibility of use.
What do you think, Greg?
I think it's fine the way it's been proposed. I've been
Taking it,
following.
adding it to the housing fund and taking it out of the general fund?
Which way?
That's what I thought you were proposing. I thought it sounded fine.
Taking it out of general fund, adding to what's available for housing.
Isn't that necessary in order to?
So maybe Greg, just so if you take it out of the 5 million, you basically still have the full amount that's left of that 5 million to spend on housing. It's just some of it will now be in the housing fund. We're basically swapping assets. We have housing assets that were purchased for a deed restricted program that are going to be accounted for in the general fund, and we're moving fungible assets, cash, from the general fund into the housing fund. Now, if you do it as proposed, the 5 million total appropriation, not counting what we've already spent, Francie, would actually be $7 million that's been appropriated for housing, which is fine. I just wanted to make sure that the board understood you're adding to that total appropriation for housing. You could also just use the appropriation, the 5 million, transfer it to housing, and you still have the exact same amount you have today to use on housing. It'd just be coming out of the housing fund in one case and or general fund in the other.
Except that it would all be specified for housing if we move it into housing.
Correct. And
Whereas
you've already earmarked.
Otherwise, it might be used for something else.
When it's in the general fund, and one of the reasons this is coming up is I generally try and maintain fund balance for the board's purposes in the general fund because it gives you more flexibility.
Right. I get
That's
that.
all. Yeah.
Kelly?
Does this move allow, like, act as an appropriation so that the money opportunities can be acted on more quickly without having to go through a supplemental process?
I don't think it makes a lot of difference in that regard. We have that 5 million, or I guess it's maybe 450 some, or 4.5 some remaining in the housing fund appropriated that could be acted upon immediately. Anything above and beyond that amount would need a supplemental request in any regard.
No matter where it is.
Right.
Oh, I see.
Kelly, this is really an exercise for our accounting purposes and making sure that the funds are appropriated in the right place. The way it was set up would add $2 million of appropriations for housing, so it would make a total of $7 million available. And yes, that would make it so we wouldn't have to go back and ask for housing on that versus the 5 million that the board had originally appropriated. I'm sorry, it's so confusing sometimes to talk about the appropriations. I don't know if that's answering your question.
I'm more confused now than I was before. I'm sorry. Kelly, do you have more questions? I thought it was cut and dried.
If finance thinks it's cleaner, then, that's good for me.
It doesn't really make a big difference on the finance side, either way we do it. If you look at the chart on the screen, if we take it out of general fund unassigned balance, what it does is it leaves less general fund balance available at the board's discretion. So it would be reducing the general fund balance. You see, our original budget had a general fund unassigned balance, the amount in blue, of about $6.7 million. We've spent some of it down with supplemental requests this year, but we've also received more sales tax than budgeted. This request would spend down that blue portion of the general fund balance. We'd have about 4.4 million remaining in that unassigned fund balance. So that leaves less available at the board's discretion for other types
Like a wildfire.
of projects.
Or something, yeah. Any other general fund, yeah.
But it would mean that then in that 5 million originally appropriated, that would be reduced, so it would show about 2.5 million remaining in that 5 million appropriation. That doesn't mean that the board could not take from this 4.4 million here and use it for housing purposes. But as John was saying, this 4.4 million is at the board's discretion. If it's in the housing fund, then it's for housing.
So that's why I was saying it provides us more flexibility if we take it out of the housing fund now rather than take it from the general fund. So if we have something that comes up and we need general fund monies, we've got them.
I get that, but I also see it as a vehicle for procrastinating with housing.
Well, it's the exact, you still have, so the other 2.5 million is in the housing fund and available for housing. So you still have a total of 5 million. So if the board's preference, policy preference is to up that 5 million to 7 million to be available for housing, then the board should approve it as it is in the supplemental appropriation now. If the board wants to hold at the 5 million, then you should take 2.5 million of the general fund appropriation to transfer over to housing, and you'd have half of it in the general fund basically and half of it in housing.
But I've heard Connie say a total of 5 million, and I've heard you say a total of 7 million. So I'm a little confused.
Well, the appropriation in the housing fund has been at 5 million. This moves fund balance into the housing fund that then could be added into your appropriation. So we could increase at the same time, and maybe that would make it clearer for the board, increase that appropriation from 5 million to 7 million.
This is basically a request to change our appropriation of from 5 million to 7 million. It doesn't matter where the money is, but you're saying, let's put this into the housing purse.
It can be done that way, or it can just remain in general fund balance, that during the budget process, the board can decide which pot it goes into.
So I've really confused this issue. So the reason we are here originally is we had bought deed restricted program where we go in on the purchase of homes with our own employees out of the housing fund. As we've been looking closer at that, it looks like an employee benefit, so we feel like we need to have those appropriations come out of the general fund.
Right.
In order to accomplish that for the transactions that have already happened, right, we need to reimburse the housing fund from the general fund. So what Connie has calculated and has in front of you is the reimbursement from the general fund to the housing fund. It is currently proposed as a new appropriation. Okay. Which, so if we transferred all 5 million from the general fund that was appropriated in the original budget, plus this supplemental, we'd be transferring $7 million into the housing fund. What I'm saying, but we haven't really spent, that money's already been spent, right? We're just transferring assets between funds for our accounting purposes. And so that would then bring down the general fund balance and increase the housing fund balance. So now we're really talking about having 7 million there. What we're proposing as an alternative, so you're not drawing down the general fund balance as much, is just to use the appropriations, the 5 million that you've already appropriated, to reimburse the housing fund.
To pay itself back.
You're taking 2.5 million from the general fund and putting it into the pocket of the housing fund. That money is then available in the housing fund to spend on housing.
Why is it available if we've already spent
Because
it?
because of exactly that, you've already spent it and you already own the assets. And so we're just transferring assets between funds. So we are taking
So the value of those units is being transferred, not cash.
Correct.
The problem is that well, not the problem, but the benefit of taking it out of the housing fund and not moving it from the general fund, for me anyway, correct me if I'm wrong, is it gives us more flexibility in use of general fund monies in case something comes up that because we're really drawing down our general fund availability of funds.
I read something in there, and pardon me if I'm confused about it, just regarding the appreciation with the, is that what was the original motivation for having to change this? Just because it wasn't, okay, I was thinking that if we were allowing appreciation on the jointly owned units to change, then we'd have to change the.
I think it was just the need to put it all in one place.
Kelly, did you have something you wanted to contribute?
Yeah, I guess I'm just wondering, because the conversation relative to the $5 million appropriation was 10 months ago. So why wasn't it just in the housing fund all year? I think we're just being confused because the thing that's changing is how we're reimbursing the housing fund from general fund based on how we're analyzing the use of that expenditure, sort of separately from the discussion about the dedication of $5 million towards housing solutions that took place last year.
Connie, do you have a suggestion for us? Anything that would make your life easier or would be smoother, or do you see any advantage one way or the other? I know you're trying not to give us advice, but would you please?
I think that having more in the general fund leaves the board more discretion. And that funding can always be used for housing purposes or moved into the housing fund at another date whenever the board so desires.
Okay,
Something
well,
comes
I'm
up, we can
going
take
with you
general
then,
funding.
and you, whichever one makes that happen, that's the one I choose.
That would be.
I did have a question I was hoping to have an answer to.
Kelly, I may need a little clarification. I'm not sure I'm understanding the question well enough to answer it, unless Connie, you.
Well, I think, Kelly, if I am understanding correctly, you are saying that you thought the $5 million was already there in the housing fund. We've budgeted for that $5 million in the housing fund and budgeted the transfer, so that money is tied up budgetary-wise. It has not actually been moved, but will be whenever a purchase is made.
So Kelly, the appropriation is in the housing fund, but the housing fund didn't have enough fund balance for that. So the budget has a transfer from the general fund of $5 million that would go into the housing fund for that purpose as expenditures are made. We haven't had all of those expenditures happen, so the appropriation is there. And you know, I guess the question really is if we designate this as part of the use of that $5 million right now, you still have the same amount of cash at the end of the day. But if you add in the additional $2 million, then you'll have $7 million that's available in the housing fund, which is fine. I guess, as confusing as this has been, I thought it was important for it to be transparent to the board that that's what was happening.
The more we talk about it, the more confusing.
I guess I still don't understand why the $5 million wasn't moved into the housing fund when we discussed this in the 2023 budget process.
It is appropriated. It's appropriated as a transfer, but it was not necessarily, this use was not anticipated at that time because that came after the budget.
What use?
You're coming to us now, though, asking us if we want to make that transfer.
No. The $5 million is done. That is done. The question really is, you know, you did not allocate the $5 million for a specific expenditure. Right? And so if we say the $5 million is to buy housing basically from ourselves, right? That's what I'm suggesting in order to leave more fund balance in the general fund. Your fund balance will go up by $7 million, right? In the housing fund, if you approve both the 5 million in appropriations and the 2
5
million.
million's already approved, but.
Yeah,
the
5
additional
million's
2
already
million.
approved.
Mhm.
And if you approve the additional 2 million, you'll have the 7 million, right? That goes into the housing fund.
Unspecified for what?
Right. You will still have the 5 million, quite frankly. But you're right, Kelly, because what I'm basically saying is if you just designate that the 5 million that has been approved by the board but not designated, right, which could happen in a work session, you could say, we want to use this portion of that 5 million for, this purchase of housing, right?
No matter which
you could
fund
do
it's
that.
in.
Yeah, you could definitely do
Right.
that.
I guess I would say that, the expenditures for from the employee housing impact fee were contemplated separately from the 5 million that we dedicated towards solving housing crisis.
Yeah, and that's totally fair. That's a totally fair position to take. I just didn't want you all to be surprised when it was 7 million coming out of the general fund total into the housing fund. And you do have the option just to do it at 5 million and preserve more flexible fund balance. So, but I think you're right, Kelly. That was not anticipated as a use of those funds at the time. I
The
think is what
equity
you're saying.
program?
Yeah.
But we didn't use those funds for it. We didn't use it directly from the housing, the $5 million we set aside
That's
for
correct.
housing. We did not use it from that.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. Patty, I think I know your opinion. Greg?
I would just soon leave it in the general fund. If we don't actually have a specific use for it, we can always, when we do, we can pull from the general fund. It's not that big a deal.
Unless
And
we spend it.
gives us the flexibility. Well, if we spend it, we'll be
Unless we
talking about
spend
it.
That's right.
And
And
we
if
haven't,
we-
we haven't spent it yet. We don't know what we're gonna
Right.
spend it on, so it seems to me we don't need to
If we
supplement
take it out of the general fund now and put it in housing, we can't just use it at.
Right, then what if a general fund, God forbid, a natural
Something.
disaster or a pandemic or
We're seeing
something
things
else,
happen around the
another
world.
opportunity comes along. Then we'd have to take it out of the housing fund back to the general fund, which would not go over well with anybody.
I don't know if it's easy to
Or if you
take
could
it
even
out.
do that, right? I guess we could, it's at our discretion, but why don't we just leave it in the general fund for now until we need it?
Kelly? You're on mute.
But yes, I would say that that's what we're doing with this.
Now you're fine. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Now we can.
Okay, I guess I would just say, but that's what we're doing with this decision, because now we're saying we're going to pay for the housing that we think is an employee benefit is coming out of the housing fund, rather than the general fund, which is where our other employee benefits come from. So, I'm not going to make a big stink right now. We'll have plenty of budget time to talk about it. I would have liked for us to spend the full 5 million that we allocated for housing solutions this year. If maybe John or Ashley feel like that's still a possibility in the 3 remaining months of 2023. But that was the goal with that, 5 million. So now we're using half of it to cover an employee benefit.
But we can still move the money around. When we come up with the plan that we stick to and we can move forward on housing.
We're not using half of it for an employee benefit.
I think
I think
in
both things. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Just like,
I think in this case you are in the sense of the transfer, but 5 million is still going to be available for expenditure, basically.
we're just relabeling the 2 million we put into the equity program.
Program.
It would be drawing down the 5 million so that there would be less available.
Fair enough.
We can always put
Yeah.
more money into the housing fund when we come up with a plan that we stick to and we get done.
Yeah, it's just a matter of which fund it sits in, right? If it's sitting in the housing fund, and Kelly's right, that this would be drawing down on that 5 million originally. If we have more than that in projects before the end of the year, we'd have to come back for an additional transfer. Or it's coming out of the general fund, which is how it's currently proposed, right? To draw down the general fund so that you'd have the purchase of those assets. And so you'd have the 5 million plus the 2 million in this case,
Where?
In the housing.
in the housing fund.
So, can I have a question?
But you want the 2 million in the general fund because you want it to be part of our employee.
Yeah, that's up to you. That's up to you guys at the end of the day.
Okay, yes, Patty.
So my question is, if we move it into the housing fund, can we just come back and say, oh, we don't want it for housing, now we're gonna move it back? Or is it,
I
to me,
think,
when it's in a dedicated fund, it's in a dedicated fund.
Yeah.
It's like we can't go to a dedicated fund like the road and bridge monies and say, we're gonna pull them out now and use them in the general fund.
we would have to be able to demonstrate that it originally came from the general fund. You could not transfer housing impact fee dollars back
So
into the
it's
general
not as
fund.
clean that way. It's
but
cleaner
you
to leave it in
could-
the general fund and move it into the housing fund than it is to move it out of the housing fund back into the general
Only
fund.
if you want to spend it on something besides housing.
Right.
Like a disaster if we needed to. And I would rather have that opportunity to use it for that, or the simpler method is to move it from general fund into housing fund in the future between now and whenever, when we need it.
When we need it.
But, you know, I think, yes, it would give you more. I mean, it's the same amount of money. It's where it's sitting and, you know, how quickly it can be accessed. Kelly's right, too, that we spent that 2 million originally, and now we're saying we think it should have come out of the general fund. And so to keep the intent of 5 million, you know, available for new housing initiatives, then, you know, probably the way that it's proposed right now is right. It's just pushing a lot more. It's pushing a total of 7 million into the housing fund. Yeah.
Well,
Okay, I needed one more explanation on why the 2 million needs to go back from the general fund and not the housing fund. I mean, well, didn't you just say that the 2 million should be allocated from general because it wasn't part of this initial 5 million as proposed? Is that what?
Basically, the general fund is buying those assets from the housing fund.
Got it, copy that, okay. Will that confuse things in the future when we're using money from the general fund to help buy housing while our housing fund isn't utilized?
No, we can still add money to the housing fund
We
anytime
can add
we
money, I'm
want.
just trying to think, you know, let's all put it in one pot
Yeah.
that makes sense for that purpose.
Let's move it all to general fund and be able to use it for whatever we need whenever we need it. I'm not going there,
That's scary
so,
also.
not going there.
It's fine either way. You're going to have the same amount of money. It's just what pocket it's in. And
Just-
And accessing it isn't any more difficult.
does the housing impact fee
really.
go into the housing fund?
Yes.
Or is it, yes.
And it has to be kept separate than any other monies because it has to be spent differently.
No, so, well, maybe we should keep it separate.
But I think it's easier to move money from the general fund somewhere else than just to take it out of a dedicated fund and move it back into the general
Right.
fund.
They were dedicated funds,
correct,
so
originally.
I think we should then treat them as that. I'm changing my mind.
So which way have you changed it this time?
I'm changing my mind to keeping the 5 million, which is now, I think, 4,800,000 or whatever it is, in the housing fund, so that we don't easily spend it for something else.
Oh, yeah, I'm not saying take any of that money out. I'm just saying let's keep money in the general fund when we can, so we have flexibility in use. I like to be prepared in case something happens. I'm an emergency management type person. And it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, and I want to make sure that we're ready to go.
Kelly, go for it. You're biting your tongue, I can see that.
Again, I think we have resources to be solving a crisis that exists now. And we have projects that can use that money.
Yeah,
Housing projects?
In all likelihood, we'd be coming back to the general fund. For example, if we move forward with Eagle County on the purchase of the tree farm property, right? That's going to be probably a significant. We still don't have the appraisal. We still don't know what that is. We don't know what to ask for necessarily. We also have Phillips, which we know we're going to have to provide significant match dollars and such on. So there's not going to be a shortage of funds, and it's not.
What do you mean?
A shortage of needs.
You mean
I'm
a
sorry.
shortage
There's not
of
going to be a
availability?
shortage of needs for funds.
Yeah.
Thank you for that addition. It was an important miss
And then
there.
we're going to do this and
And
that,
there,
and we have
and
plenty
there
of
will be a
funds.
significant shortage of funds in order to capture all this without threading together partners. And so we probably spent too much time. I just wanted the board to understand those options. You know, at the end of the day,
The money's
it's
still
going to
there.
be the exact same amount of dollars in our total fund balance is going to exist. And so this is not, don't make it too difficult of a decision. We just try and, I will always err on the side of providing the board more flexibility or encouraging more flexibility. That's the only reason I brought this up as an option. I'm sorry I did, because I think I confused it too much on something. It's going to end up in the same bottom line number.
Right.
Overall.
But if you're trying to give us the most flexibility, you'd be arguing against doing what is put before us. Is that correct?
That would be
Correct.
keeping it in the
That's
general
So
fund,
let's
is the
leave
most
it.
flexibility.
I would really be willing to go with your suggestion, and knowing that it's likely that we're going to spend this money on housing, but since we don't know what for and where quite yet and how much, let's just leave it in the general fund and go from there. And I don't think that takes away from any of the aspirations of anybody. Thank you.
Might encourage us to actually do something on housing,
Yeah,
so we
might.
can switch the money over.
Well, if we're going to be seeking out partners for either of these projects that you're talking about right now, God knows what other projects we might have. We're going to need some seed money. We have to come up with some money. We can't just go to people without any money. And we have designated these funds to be for that. So I agree with Kelly. I don't see why they haven't been in the housing fund all along from the moment that we appropriated them, or I don't know if that's the right word, but designated that they should be spent for housing. So I don't know. We're kind of split right now. So
Why don't you guys go ahead with it? I mean, if you guys go ahead with it as proposed, it will be fine.
Great.
I'm not going along with it as
I'll go
proposed.
along with it as proposed, just to keep us moving, because it doesn't really matter.
I won't, so I'll be pulling it off of it tomorrow and not voting on it.
Okay. I think
I
we
can
know
do
it's-
that.
you've got direction though, right?
I've been there
Yes.
quite a few times.
Okay,
Yeah,
I will
not a
leave as
problem.
is.
Okay.
Okay, let's go back. Is Kurt on?
I'm gonna need more chocolate if we have
Brett
another one
is.
like that.
Okay.
I'm sure we gave them enough time to get on. But
Well, let's go to
Got
the
Brett here.
dispatch request, and we'll have
Now, which fund is this money coming out of?
dispatch actually has no impact on fund
Confused
balance,
about the order
which
of
is
Do we have a
always
hotline
very
to dispatch,
nice.
though, for
Because
emergencies like the
E911
last one?
will contribute what is lacking to pay for this project.
Just to bring us up to speed.
So, yes, and if you want to, there's Brett.
There he is.
Great.
Hi, Brett.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Sorry, I just completely changed my office, so I don't know where to look except for the camera. There we go. Thanks, Connie. So, yeah, this is part of a larger public safety systems project that we're going to be embarking on over the next 5 years. And really, what we need is help with our GIS, our public safety GIS layer, that really just needs to be cleaned up and solidified. and made more precise than we're able to through county resources. Because all of the newest technology, the next gen 911 stuff that we're hopefully going to be putting in the next 5 years is all GIS based. So the very first thing that we need to do to move forward, and just for the general day-to-day of having good maps for our systems, we need to get this base layer precise. And it's a little bit of a heavy lift, just because we've never got it to this level before. So to get it to where we really need it to be, it would take far more resources than the county's able to provide. The GIS department, they've done a great job for everything for us. They just don't have the bandwidth to take this on in the time that we need it. So we're looking at trying to get that done through a third-party company who can dedicate resources to it by the end of this year. So as we move into our newer system starting next year, everything will be ready to go, and our maps will be as good as they can be for public safety.
Okay. Sounds like something that we would say yes to.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with it by any means.
No other questions from the board?
Nope.
Okay,
I'm
thank
happy.
you. Thanks, Brett.
Thanks, everybody.
And I think Kurt must have had a hard time logging in. We had emailed earlier, so he must have just had some technical problems. But the Public Health Fund has received a grant for COVID-19 detection and mitigation for those experiencing homelessness. And the grant will mainly cover staff salary time involved in this outreach, but there is some funding also for test kits and some materials and some flyers. And since the staff salaries are already budgeted in 2023, this is actually an increase to the public health fund balance because it's bringing in more money than any of the additional appropriations for the test kits and so on. And so this is just appropriating the different dollar amounts for that grant.
From where?
The grant is, let's see, it's an ELC grant. It's coming through the state.
Okay.
I assume it's through CDPHE.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any questions on that one, guys?
Nope. I'm happy with it.
Okay.
All right, let's move on.
One more item, and I'll have GR come up. This one is not in your packet, but we would like to include it in the resolution. And it's for the microgrid.
Thanks,
Hello,
everyone.
GR.
Again, I'm GR. I'm the county's engineering and construction director. Since our work session and our direction to move forward through location and extents back in August, we had pulled the team back together to do our final estimates before we started to order all of the equipment for the project. With our procurement rules, we need to have an allocation of funds enough to finish the procurement of all of these pieces of material. And so as our inflationary pressures have gone up and some of our project requirements have changed, our delta between the existing project funding and the need for funds to get the first phase done is a bit north of $1 million.
What a surprise.
I know. I always come with the good news, Francie.
Yeah, always.
And so we are having some conversations with our project partners for some of the funding in 2024. We don't know what the results of that are. But our equipment only price is about $3.6 million. And our current fund for this project sits at about 3.3. So we would have a supplemental request of $350,000 so that we can start ordering all of the long lead time items needed for this project. We would come back during the 2024 budget process with a funding scheme that would request another $400,000 from the general fund. And the other sources to be determined are potential other funds or through our project partners, increasing their contribution to the project.
Remind me who our project partners are.
Our project partners are Holy Cross Energy and RAFTA. And then we have a generous grant through DOLA for $1.7 million.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And the airport.
And the airport, yes. Sorry.
The airport, right.
Yes.
Yeah. I saw a truck go by the other day with huge batteries on the back. You know, it was a semi, and the trailer, that's all it had on it was like these two giant batteries.
And as a testament to how fast this industry is moving, since the time that I presented, the type of battery that we are trying to finish our procurement on has already changed to make sure that it has the right UL certifications for our unique elevation, which is a lot different than most other use cases.
Wow.
And the other thing that we've learned is because you buy these as a container, the modularity of them is a bit different. So if a container comes with, if we asked for 2 megawatt hours, and the supplier said, as when we talked to them yesterday, actually, because you need 2 of these buckets, each one of them is about 1.3 to 1.4 megawatt hours. So you end up with 2.6. And so that helps drive that pricing as well, because all we would be doing is we'd still have to buy the 2 buckets, and then they would have to take out some of the cells from it to meet our project requirements. In the long run, we want to have all of that capacity anyhow.
Right.
And so and a lot of this comes down to phasing. Our first estimates for phasing assumed that we were just going to build a $20 million project. And that's not our funding reality. And so to build all of the infrastructure up front for this is the value engineered version of drawing down the project to the bare bones.
So you are doing the infrastructure ahead of time, and then you just fill in with the units?
Yes.
And we're sure that that infrastructure is still going to be good in a few years as fast as the technology is changing?
Yes. I have confidence for our first battery site, because what we will do is we will build the yard to facilitate that. All of the connectors and the wires and all of those things won't change. So that piece of infrastructure will be for this set of phases. Now, when other portions of the project, when RAFTA wants to build a battery on their site, or when the airport is ready to build a battery sometime in the future, those will have the same type of infrastructure design, but then the technology may have changed, and there will be an opportunity at that time to update whatever needs to be
respond
updated.
to those changes. Okay. It's nerve-wracking, and to think how fast things change, and then we're going to put all this money into setting it up for this technology today, when we're not going to actually be bringing it in until tomorrow, you know?
Trust me, I live with that anxiety every day on this project. And I do think that the way that we have this lined out with phases right now helps insulate us from any of the major changes.
Okay, great.
It's like we're building the desktop that the new computer that changes every 6 months sits on.
Yeah, exactly.
And now they're going to do zinc batteries that are heavier, bigger, et cetera, et cetera. I'm like, oh my God.
We'll replace the whole thing with a giant gravity battery.
You know, if,
lot of batteries.
we've looked at all of those
I know
different
you have. I
iterations.
appreciate it.
Keep looking. It ain't over.
I know.
Keep looking quickly.
Okay, that's a relatively small ask for you, GR.
May not be over.
Again, for 2024, we'll be in front
You'll
of
be
you for the
back.
budget process. But this lets us actually order all of the equipment.
Okay, it's okay with me. Kelly, do you have an opinion on it? That's an okay?
That's a yes and a no. That's that gray area.
That's no opinion, yeah, okay.
Hey, it's JR. How do you say no to that guy? Come on.
I know, really. Okay.
Okay, all right,
Thanks.
that's it.
Thank you for keeping current on the
and
research.
tomorrow
That's
for
a
first-
full-time job in and of itself.
Tomorrow for first reading, I'll bring a revised version of the resolution that includes the 350,000. So, thank you.
Thanks.
Oh, Kurt
Kurt
joined.
is online now.
If you have any questions for Kurt on his request, and
Tell him we're already moving it forward. He might not want to say anything.
Just making sure that I understand which of these we've covered. I was a little confused about the order of the,
Yeah, I'm sorry we jumped around
We jumped around
today.
because we didn't have people on yet.
no worries, just checking twice.
I'm good with Kurt's request.
We didn't
so-
talk about response, did we?
Yes, we did.
Yeah,
We've
we
already
did.
approved that
I know,
250. It's the
but did you
second.
just say we've already approved it, so we don't need to talk about it?
Yeah,
Somehow I missed that. Oh, maybe it was when I stepped out. Okay,
it's the next 250 we're gonna have to discuss.
all right,
Meeting prep.
so, that's it?
Thanks, Kurt. We're good.
Yeah, no questions for Kurt?
No, I don't think so. Hi, Kurt.
Thanks, everyone.
Anytime.
Thanks, Connie.
Thank you, Connie. See you tomorrow.
Okay, and now we have prep for Lake County. Is that where we are? Yes, it is.
Yeah, and we did have an opportunity to chat with our friends over in Lake County. They had 4 items that they're hoping to have some conversation about in terms of what we're doing. And I don't know exactly, I wasn't here for the conversation, so I don't have all the context for these, but affordable housing is at the top of their list, housing. What we're doing with short-term rentals and our experience there. Taxes was another one, and I assume that they're going to be talking about, I don't know if they're wanting to talk about what's happening with our property taxes and what our thoughts are with assessed values, or if we're looking at ballot questions. I need to confirm that. And then they wanted to talk about what we're doing with land use and comprehensive planning, so like our growth management and such. So those were all topics they were interested in hearing more about or conversing on.
Not the airport and wildfire?
We could add those to the
No,
list, but I'm
no.
sure they will not be interested in those. They do.
They do
We
have a
send
great
quite a
little
bit of
airport.
business to them, actually.
Kelly.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be interested in their FBO, which I think deals with some of our drop and go overflow traffic. So that maybe I'll take a separate trip over there. But I'm going to guess that the tax thing is related to our tax relief program, because Jeff Fielder and I have had several conversations over the summer about that.
Oh, that's helpful. Thanks, Kelly.
Well, last time we didn't really have official conversations. We just had sort of table-side conversations.
Yeah, it's more topics, and then it might be good for both staff. They did not have, I don't think they had their manager there last time, Tim.
No, we
So-
had Public Works was there, I think.
Yeah, it's always good for us to have a little bit of idea what you want to talk about so we can be prepared too.
Any issues they might have with oversized vehicles on the path, I don't think it's been a big deal, but it'd be just nice to touch base quickly on that. And if anything, we might want to bring them a copy of our short-term rental regulations. And do we have just a draft quickie on our growth management committee? Just for their reading?
Yeah, we have a summary.
Yeah, I think
the
that would be a
executive
good
summary.
idea to bring along.
While we're on topic, let's give them our healthy rivers and streams protocols to chew on. They're not on the they don't are in the
For
western
them to raise
watershed.
property taxes, sales tax?
They're just healthy rivers and streams. If they're since we have a healthy rivers and streams plan to reach out to other adjoining counties, why not share it with them too?
Of course, we may only want those on the western slope to actually have a tax to advocate for water.
Do they maybe, yeah.
And when you're
They're the
driving
ones
through there,
sucking.
you'd like to see them take good care of their streams, which have been so ravaged.
I just can't
That
wait
is
to
true.
see what Twin Lakes looks like.
I know. I'm eager too.
It's still pretty full when I came by.
That is pretty cool.
Okay, so Kelly, you'd like some information about how their FBO is affected or not by kind of traffic coming from overflow, basically coming from us. Patty, oversized vehicles, any issues that they're seeing on their side with that. And then Greg just providing a kind of a quick hit on our healthy rivers and streams.
Why not? Sure.
And then the other topics, we can bring some summary information on how we've been approaching tax relief, short-term rentals, and the summary on our growth management.
What are we gonna say about short-term rentals? Are we gonna have our meeting where we get a report back from whomever?
We will not have that, I believe, before this. But I think it's more just talking about our experience with putting regulations in place and what we're learning in the process and what we might
The
be
short-term rentals?
changing.
Yeah, our short-term
What
rentals.
are we learning?
Our short-term
What do you
rentals.
mean? You mean when we were putting in the regulations, what that experience was like?
Yeah.
Rather than what is the follow-up?
Right. If we don't have that information, put together yet, we won't have that.
We don't
for
have
you
that till
guys.
the 26th.
I was hoping to have it at some point, just a briefing from our attorneys on their assessment of the lawsuits we're seeing in Summit County, and are we just anticipating that'll happen here, or is ours set up differently? I don't know if ours is different enough that we would be excluded from any sort of vulnerability there.
Ours is certainly set up differently, but I can't answer the broader question about, what we might see here. I do think we're anticipating that there will be more efforts around short-term rental regulations and testing some of those in court.
We anticipate it, right? Haven't seen it, so let's just shut up about it. But no, I kind of like to hear what, it'd be nice to have a briefing on that.
Yeah, and I don't know that we'll have that necessarily. The 26th is when we're coming back, if I recall correctly, on the short-term rental
Yes, the 26th.
briefing.
That morning. 10 o'clock.
And when is?
10 o'clock on the 26th, I believe.
Well, we may have it actually that day, so we will have that information, Francie.
On the
Okay.
26th. We
Well,
will
that makes me
just
feel
see.
better about discussing it.
It's on the same day.
I won't be at that meeting.
Okay, we'll hear the presentation and then we'll form our thoughts. Okay, would you guys like to take a break? It's scheduled, we're a little late for it, and we have about an hour.
Go get a drink of water.
Yeah, all right, we'll take a 10-minute break. Can you hear me, Andorra? Welcome back to the work session for the Picton County Commissioners on Tuesday, September 12th. And our next discussion is about Proposition HH. And is Ann around?
Where is Ann, actually? Just a second here. Thought she was on.
It's like eating a Rice Krispies treat.
By the way, autospell corrects HH to huh? So
That's my feeling about it.
Oh my gosh.
oh, maybe Rich is doing this. Rich, you're not doing
Hey,
it.
John, is Pam down there by chance?
Patty, you heard about Michael Ferrara, right?
We're
Yeah, I
trying
was
to
at
get hold of
I
her.
was at the scene. I was coming back from Costco and was at the scene. Right.
Oh, you were at the scene.
Okay.
Oh.
I
They had a
didn't-
thing at Mountain Rescue, was it yesterday? They already had
Yeah,
a
saw the
gathering.
flag down.
Yeah. Tragic.
Yeah, I have a great story though.
Yeah.
I might have to tell it tomorrow when we do commissioner comments. It's
When they
a
do
funny
their,
Michael story.
Well, the thing is, he was so involved for so long. You can imagine having PTSD.
Well, you know, what's so sadly ironic is he saved how many lives off of Highway 82?
Right.
It was a horrible scene. That accident was horrible.
Oh, I'm sure.
And I had to take the back road, and I got a call from somebody on Watson Divide, concerned about the dust.
Right, of course.
I'm like, somebody just died, and
Yeah, let's not
she
wait.
understood that, but she had some, driving that road was brutal.
Well, much with a ton of people and washboards.
And people were flying.
Right.
And I'm like, I want to get out of my car and say, somebody just died on the highway. Would you guys slow down?
Right.
Yeah,
right.
it was horrible.
Yeah. Well, he had a hard last decade or so.
Yeah. But he was always there for you.
Yeah, well, yeah, that was the amazing thing.
Oh, here's something about Proposition HH anyway, I just got in my email from CCI.
Well, I definitely needed to have it explained to me, that's for sure.
What are we waiting for?
And
Oh,
Are we ahead of schedule?
Pam's on the weekend.
Yeah, we're ahead of schedule. We're 12
behind
minutes.
schedule.
Well, she was only on the agenda for 3:15.
There she is.
Sorry, I was listening into the supplemental request talking about housing, and I thought I'd have like
Thought
3
we'd be here
hours.
Forever, right. Yeah, I can just go, go take a bike ride, right?
Well, it's confusing because we took a break, but I don't know.
We got a little ahead of schedule.
I thought we were behind schedule, but
Yeah, now we're
apparently
good.
not.
Good, that's good. We like that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so this is Ann Driggers, and she's gonna talk to us about Proposition HH, hopefully with some
Please make it
explanation.
understandable.
Well, if it's not my
Not your fault.
fault. I'm basically just the translator here. I'll do my best
You're
to
the
translate.
messenger.
So, Proposition HH arose from Senate Bill 22-238, and that actually placed it on the ballot. Senate Bill 22-238 also had an attached, I guess, adjoining one, Senate Bill 23-303, which basically extended some of the Proposition HH kind of parameters. I don't know if you have this document that I believe was forwarded to you.
Yeah.
So this was my
32 in the packet.
attempt, having
Okay. Yeah.
attended various two DOLA presentations and Division of Property Tax presentations to all the local governments to help provide their translation of what the bills meant. So I basically sort of picked out the bits that I thought were pertinent to Pitkin County and how it would impact us as an organization. So I'll start going down through each of the sections. So in 2023, this is all part of the Senate Bill 238, which passed, and so we have to do it. So early reporting. So the treasurers are required to provide by September 15th, which is in 3 days, estimates on basically the property tax revenue reductions for each of the taxing entities within Pitkin County, so 54 of them,
Excuse me.
based upon the preliminary assessed valuations that were given to us by the assessor on August 29th, and provide that information to the Department of Revenue. It's interesting, it requires the treasurer to do that. The treasurer does not have any of that information. It is only the assessor that has the information. But thankfully, we have obviously a very good relationship between the treasurer and the assessor. So Naju and Debbie are working on it together. But it's basically this giant spreadsheet with 54 tabs that we have to fill out, giving all of these preliminary estimates in loss of revenue due to the Senate Bill 238. A couple of other wrinkles is that the information that we're giving them at this stage of the game is not in any way correct, because the assessors statewide have not been able to provide any of the proper valuation information, because they're still going through Board of Equalization and Appeals, and they're not required by the state to give us that information until November 1st anyway. So
I thought that ended September 15th, the ability to appeal, or did they have to have all the appeals done?
it did, but
They're
but
taking
we have to
time.
provide the information that's following on from all the appeals by September 15th. So
It's not gonna be
anyway,
there.
it's just a mess of dates, so we just do the best with what information we have at the
Dates
time.
got extended, so they usually had more time to compile information
Right.
without
Right.
waiting till the very end of the year.
So could you just tell me briefly, so these two bills then, just in 2 sentences, what is their intent, two bills, before we go through all of the details?
Well, I think, I'm not sure exactly what their intent is, but what they will do is provide some form of property tax relief in the form of reductions on actual value to taxpayers, and also basically puts Proposition HH on the ballot for an additional 9 years over and above the first year, which is provided in these Senate bills.
And that reduces the evaluations or provides actual tax relief for people?
It reduces this, there's a 40,000 or then 50,000, depending upon the year, reduction in actual value on your home. So for most people, that wouldn't necessarily have much of an impact at all.
And it's only on real property.
Correct. Yep. And then there'll be also a reduction in the valuation rate that the state uses, which would be equivalent to a 3% reduction in property tax increases.
So a $40,000 to $50,000 reduction in your evaluation plus a 3% reduction in how much tax you have to pay. Is that what you
Yeah.
said? Doesn't amount to very much money. Okay,
Depends where you live. I think if you lived
Can I
in,
ask a question?
of course.
Yeah.
So, I may be ahead of it, but I'm gonna put it out, you can answer it later if you'd like. Is that, my mic's on, so is that, they're looking at a way to pay back, fill the gaps for counties and in districts who are losing money with Tabor reserves, which Kelly, I think, brought up may not be allowed by Tabor.
May not, what about Tabor?
Be allowed to use
Oh.
Tabor monies to backfill property tax losses or whatever, gaps. Kelly, is that right? That's a question?
Well, this would change Tabor. So it would let the state keep money that they could then use to backfill rather than have it dedicated to a Tabor refund.
So Proposition HH would then amend Tabor? Sounds like they're asking more than one question in one question.
It's hard to even find the language to this, but there's elements to this that would change the amount of money that can go back to the state, which now is limited by Tabor. And there's elements to it which are statutory, so they could be subject, they're spelled out in the bill, the enabling bill, but could also be subject to changes in next year's legislature or subsequent legislatures.
Okay, so that would be a
So it
question.
depends on what part you're looking at.
Right, that would be a question I would have as far as a question that asks two questions, because I thought questions could only ask one
So,
question.
yeah, and Patty, that actually was challenged.
Will be.
And it looks like it has already been cleared. The Supreme Court rejected the challenge.
Interesting.
but they left it open.
They left it
their
open, yeah.
rejection was based upon the fact that the voters had not actually voted on it yet. So they
You'd have
left
to wait
it
till it
open
was
so
voted on
that
and
once,
then-
if it does pass, then they can come back and
And so if it passes, and then they can come back and challenge it, it wouldn't have passed.
Yeah,
Okay.
but that is a question that's come up.
And the other question I think is unanswered, this is a big question for me, is the primary residence. And they really haven't clarified what that means or who will determine that.
So if Proposition HH passes, there's going to be a task force pulled together by the Department of Revenue with the assessors that would determine how they would implement that.
So, any idea how long that process will take?
Okay, well, you had a plan, so if you want to go back to your plan,
Yeah,
we
I
will
just,
listen to you for a while.
Well, mine just talks about the impacts of the county organization itself, which
Yeah,
are
great.
fairly minimal. And I think what you're talking about is the greater implications for policy and the citizens of our county and the state. But
sorry, I was just
so
thinking the
mine's
bigger
really
picture.
quite boring, but I'll happily go through it. But we will receive a backfill amount in the first year. So for 2024, we would receive a backfill amount because that's set into the Senate Bill 238. However, if Proposition HH passes, we won't get any backfill because we basically our increases are too great. There are very few counties in the state that would actually receive backfill. However, there are certain districts that would receive some. As far as we're concerned, the ambulance district would receive about a 50% backfill amount for lost revenue.
Even under HH?
Yeah.
School districts?
The school districts do extremely well out of this whole thing, so it's kind of a yeah.
Because I know it's being touted by some as this is a way to fund your schools, and people are only seeing that narrow viewpoint.
And then, so the ambulance district would be 50% held whole. Then, like an example, open space and trails, because they have a fixed mill levy, and the reduction in valuations and the reduction in the assessment rate means that they would receive less revenue. For all of our other funds, they are restricted, and so we can adjust the mill according to what we can, the maximum amount we can bring in, which is Tabor plus new construction.
Plus what?
typically. Say again?
Tabor plus,
New construction, so new additions to the valuations. So I think the biggest thing that would really affect us or you would be calendar changes. If Proposition HH passes, you would have to certify your mill levy not on December 15th or before, but you would have between December 28th and January the 5th. So that would require a special meeting of the board to approve the mill levies.
Couldn't do it prior to that? We'd only do it
No,
during that
because
timeframe?
we need to know what the valuations are in order to set the mill.
Well, that's a deal breaker.
I have a question about.
It's going to ruin your
the
holiday
backfill.
break.
But the
do it
backfill
from New
funds
Zealand?
that are coming to the different, all the jurisdictions, or
They will come to all the jurisdictions, yeah.
The first year.
where does that money come from?
Um,
If we've just reduced all the property taxes, why is there money to pay the municipalities and the counties back?
Because I think
They've already
the
paid it out.
de-brucing of the state through this proposition. Am I right, Kelly? So they're asking to keep all of their,
Yeah, as I understand it, the question asks for a 1% increase in the formula, the Tabor formula that the state gets to keep over, I think it's inflation. And then that gets compounded over years. So that is the revenue that they would use to backfill. And if you've read any of the articles, it's expected that they will also use to fill the school funding deficit that's accrued over 20 years. But that's not, the school funding deficit isn't spelled out in the bill. That's just the ramifications that people expect for this. But the retention of the funds to the state is spelled out in the proposition.
Thank you.
The backfill amounts can be subject to further negotiation. I sat in on a meeting with CCAT, our executive board, and Senate President Fenberg, who talked about the backfill and acknowledged that for some jurisdictions it's inadequate, including Pickens counties, because it's based on a percent. If you're over a threshold of increase in valuation, they assume you're going to make up your budget deficit through that increase in valuation. Whereas I sort of argued, yes, but our funds are capped, so we may not do that, and we may need some more backfill provisions in the future. And that element is up for further discussion at the legislature. But the money they keep would be based on whether this gets approved by the voters or not. But I have a question related. Anne, you mentioned in this, thank you, this was a really helpful diagram to walk us through the issues and ramifications. When we go through budget, will we discuss some of this about the open space and trails and the ambulance fund? You call out that we'll need to sort of project what 2023's any mill levy reduction, how that might be affected in out years.
Yes. I mean, I think in our 5-year plan, we can forecast that, and certainly for the ambulance district, where when I calculated the mill levy that we went to the voters with last year, I based it on a 10-year cash flow forecast, assuming that we will get the full amount of revenue that we were allowed to collect. So we'll need to look at it. And that would, obviously our valuations are going to go up significantly. So we would do a mill levy credit to bring it down, but I would need to forecast the next 10 years to make sure we have enough fund balance to keep the ambulance district going before calculating the mill levy credit.
Right, okay. Because the mill levy credit, as we would assess it this year, would affect those calculations in out years.
Yes, only in the fact that we would, obviously reduce the amount of money that we could collect in total. And so we just need to make sure we even it out and that we have enough fund balance to purchase ambulances and do everything else that we promised to do.
Okay,
Patty
that makes
promised
sense to me. Thank you.
What else do you need to tell us? Is there anything that you think we should absolutely have gleaned from this,
Yeah, nobody knows what they're doing.
other than that?
Not
Boy,
really.
what an uncertain future you have trying to sort all this stuff out. And isn't this quest for certainty what treasurers and assessors all are striving for? And this just seems like a complete Gordian knot, to put it politely. I could
I
come
have
up with
my
other
opinions,
terms.
but they're not.
We like your opinions.
We think we know what your opinions are on this one.
I mean, I don't think it does anything for the property taxpayers, and it just, personally, takes control away from local government and gives it to the state, so.
Well,
That seems to be happening
good insight. Thank you
A
for
lot,
that.
more than normal.
which is interesting with a Democratic governor. Well,
Should we file a
A Democratic
protest?
governor?
so this is further control on the ability that we're allowed to charge for property tax over and above what we're already limited by Tabor.
Correct.
Good way to put it. Yeah.
Okay, Kelly.
Yeah, I mean, I would just note that the context for this was to stave off a different ballot measure that would have just put a flat cap on increases across property tax, value assessments that we know is an important part of the calculation for property tax, and which is incredibly regressive. So essentially, if this dies, then we have 238, which already passed the legislature and lowers the rates, the assessment rates, and the question doesn't go away, right? Like it continues to have a space for more negative property tax measures to get on the ballot, which, these are very confusing to voters. And as we saw in the income tax reduction question that passed last year, including in Pickens County, just because a tax measure is regressive does not mean progressive voters will vote it down. So I think that's some of the context that this lives in. I think part of the context is for individuals to decide if the state should keep more of Tabor revenue. There's a lot of criticism about Tabor really hamstringing how well our state can budget. You can decide if you think that's a fair argument or not. But we do underfund our schools based on our statewide per pupil formula year over year over year, and have some of the lowest funding across the country. for schools, and we have some of the lowest property tax and effective tax rates across the country in Colorado. So, you know, I don't know if our board needs to take a position on this, but those are some of the things to keep in mind, I think.
Who drove 238? Do you know, Kelly? Who was the driver behind that?
I'm not sure. I don't remember.
Okay.
I remember 238. We have 238. We got it. It's ours. You know, 303 was the Prop HH legislation. And that, I think, was driven from the governor's office in response to trying to stave off those more regressive ballot measures.
Okay. Thank you, Anne.
So, but can I have so this year, most of our deadlines are all moved back towards the first of the year?
If Proposition HH passes.
If it passes.
Yep.
Kind of crams everything in there, doesn't it? Okay, thank you.
Thanks for that.
Well, thank you so
More
much.
to come, right?
Well, that takes us to review of future agendas. So do you have stuff for us, John?
Let's see. Sorry, I'm just reviewing here real quick.
Starting with tomorrow,
Can I ask Greg a question? When are you going to be gone, Greg? October
13th to the 22nd.
of October.
Yeah.
Francie, are you leaving?
I haven't heard whether I'm going to be going in the Grand Canyon or my daughter-in-law is going to be going. I haven't heard.
And Steve will be traveling and hopefully being able to Zoom in that week, but.
Yeah.
depends
If I
on-
go, I will not be able to zoom in, but
Right,
I
and-
doubt if I'm going.
Okay.
It's a long trip. I mean, it would be amazing. It's like another world, but I'd leave a lot behind in this world. So
Yeah. I don't know, I think I might jump on that raft. Yeah, okay, I just want, yeah.
If the opportunity arises, you have to go. You know that, right?
I've been once,
Okay, that's good.
and I was
18 day,
able to row then.
18 or 16 day.
I did 16 when I went, and I was the rower on my boat, and I'm not sure I can row those rapids anymore. So I'd have to be a ride-along, which doesn't appeal to me in the same way at all.
Yeah, well, it'd still be fun.
Are you looking at future agendas, John?
Yeah, and really, it looks like most of the items have been previously covered, and it looks like there was a conversation about the joint meeting with Aspen next week.
Yeah, and I just wrote to Sarah and said, is there anything more we need to talk about? Should I get in touch with Tori or what? But what do you have down for that?
Yeah, well, the city had requested a presentation on the airport. I know that you as a board have been hearing a lot about that. But I do know our partners do not have the opportunity to interface with you as much. And I think that's something that they are looking forward to get updated and have an opportunity just to have some conversation with you.
Yeah, I'm the one who whined about that, and if we could just, make it a little more compact, since we just
No more
did it.
than 3 hours.
The city's gonna have questions.
So Dan and I have a presentation we've been doing that we can shorten up, but I do think there will probably be some questions and conversation coming from our partners there. And then the Wildfire Collaborative, it looked like there was some discussion maybe around also including some of the emergency management response and movement. We'll have to see with our staffing right now how prepared we are for that conversation.
Can I-
But
Well, Steve had requested a presentation on what they are seeing as the current evacuation routes, and he thought it would tie in well to the wildfire presentation. So we're not asking for a whole lot, but we'd like to have some update and where that stands. I know it's
So
online
let's-
somewhere and we could go look, but.
Yeah, but, I mean, so who's presenting for is it the Wildfire Collaborative or is it Ally from the fire station?
So it would be Wildfire Collaborative, and so I think we'd be asking, I've lost Angie's
You heard
last
it was
name.
Ally from the Fire Protection District. The Wildfire Collaborative did not speak at the meeting at the fire station. So it could be a whole different.
I think it's a whole different presentation. So the reason that this seemed timely is about this time. I think a year ago at a joint meeting, you all talked about trying to generate partnerships around mitigation projects and such. And really that led to a lot of conversations that led to the creation of this valley-wide wildfire collaborative that has been doing a lot of projects, but we haven't really brought it back to you, and it hasn't been brought back to the council. And so we thought we'd take some of that time to brief you on that. It is different than what was done at the fire station.
What I thought.
Yeah.
But the other thing is I suggested having Alex Parker there, having Bill Lynn there from the police department, and having our fire marshal present, because they're the ones that actually have the information about the evacuation opportunities.
Yeah, it's going to be very situation dependent, and
Right, but I think that city council and I think the rest of my board members want to at least have some idea that we do have a plan, and the plan is very vague now without knowing what kind of disaster and where the wind's blowing, literally.
Whether
So-
it's summer or winter and so on.
But I thought, it was my idea, and I talked with John about having those other three people, if they're available, be at that meeting to answer questions about specifics to evacuation. Does the board have I think the more answers we have in the room to our questions, maybe the better.
yeah, we can definitely check on
If they're
availability.
available.
Yeah.
And I'm glad to hear it's the Wildfire Collaborative that's presenting. I think it'll be a different presentation than the one at the fire
Yeah, and I'm sorry that wasn't clear. So it's something that Sarah and I had talked about that is really follow-up from one of our previous joint meetings, and a lot of good work and partnerships have been, built really through Garfield, Eagle, and Pickens counties, and a lot of the mitigation projects that we've been able to fund have really come through those conversations.
So where are we in terms of the Aspen meeting? A presentation on the airport with an FBO discussion or not?
Well, we will talk about where we are in that
Okay.
process, yeah.
And then wildfire collaborative, some kind of presentation to us? What about evacuation routes? Is that?
You're not, the presentation there, the issue is what you are going to hear from the folks is that we will plan depending on the situation. That you're not going to, if you're looking on, here's what there's only really one way in and out depending on the season and what the event is. And so the plan would be dependent on, is it a mudslide? Is it a fire? Which direction
No,
is it
I
coming
know,
from?
I get that,
Yeah.
sorry. I didn't mean to ask
And
you
it'll
to say
be-
that again. But there was some discussion about bike trails and the bridge over
There's some
by
generalized-
Buttermilk as
yeah.
possible things and all that kind of stuff. I mean, you're saying they'll design something at the moment and respond to citizens about that. So, but what is there to plan other than getting in your car and driving over Independence if it's summer and out, I mean, I thought there were some other possibilities that had been proposed, so that's what I was thinking that somebody would talk about. Like,
No, you're absolutely right, Francie, and I think that what you're asking for is just a generalized, here's the options, the parking garage or the golf course or this bike path.
Exactly,
Yeah,
like what's on the table?
Where do I go and tell me A, B, and C, but what are the options that we as the elected officials see out there that we know would be part of a plan dependent upon the situation? Does that make sense?
Yeah,
I'm not
I-
liking this. I
It'd
just
be-
all over you, like you don't know what to do with it.
But that's what Bill Lynn did at the fire station. He
Yeah.
said, it's ugly, guys. I'm just telling you, it's ugly, because right now I can't tell you to go to A, B, C, or D, because I don't know what you're running from.
And that's why I think the conversation, we have a process in place that we can talk about, but
Yeah.
and we can tell you that it could happen on Rio Grande Trail. We can move a certain number of vehicles.
Exactly, that kind of stuff. Because just to say, we don't know, it depends on the event, is really a frustrating thing to hear, because, you know, so what might happen? Like, what could happen? What's available to us? You know, like, not just like, well, it depends on the event. That's like,
I think they can provide you that information, because they did at the fire station
Yeah.
when they had the opportunity.
Yeah, it's not going to be probably as we can provide that information, you know, but if what you're looking to convey is, hey, when there's a fire, you should get in your car and go here, we are
I'm not
not
looking
going to
for
be
that.
conveying that. Yeah.
I'm not looking for that.
Yeah, it's going to be more about
And
how
Steve
do
is
you
the person
sign
who
up to get
requested
in?
this, so-
Yeah, how do you sign up to get information? You know, how would we plan? And, you know, an acknowledgement that there are limited routes in and out. That is a challenge here.
And the thing is, they had some good points that I think can be shared with the, both boards and with the community.
Okay.
Okay, and what else is on the agenda?
And that was gonna
And
be
then, you know, I think just a little bit of a roundtable, because I know there are a lot of other topics that it sounds like were brought up that the board may want to talk about in the future. It'd be good for you guys to have that conversation with Aspen. So whether it's, you know,
One of
I
them
think-
was, what are the next steps for determining what's gonna happen with the entrance to Aspen? Not what it's gonna look,
Right,
not
right.
what the design is gonna look like, but
what their
where
process,
are we going?
Yeah, what the process is and such. And I know there's some interest, it sounded like, in future discussion on REMP funds, and then
Right.
some space for APSHA conversations in the future.
I did write and said, you know, maybe the presentation from Matthew Kelly would be more appropriate at this joint meeting than just at our board. That would this be an opportunity for Matthew to come in and, you know, talk briefly about the budget implications and the stuff that you thought would be appropriate?
At the joint meeting coming up next week?
Yeah, because he's been sort of keyed up to come in, but I didn't really get a response from that, so I'm just wondering, what do you think about that, Kelly?
2 hours?
I mean, I think that would be for council to decide. I don't know how much time they have Matthew come in front of them, but the information is relevant for both parties.
Right, that's what I thought, so.
I just think it would be a longer discussion than 2 hours would provide for.
I thought it was just gonna be a little presentation from Matthew, not a super long thing, not really a full-on discussion, but, I mean, I know we have him somewhere else on the agenda. That flurry of emails about that, where did that go, Kelly, in terms of Matthew coming? Like, they had him in part of the
I think
budget
he's waiting to
process.
hear from our staff when to schedule it.
I know, Charlotte, we've had some challenges. I know we have him coming on the 17th for budget. The challenge has been finding time with all the budget meetings coming up just immediately in the fall here, but we are talking to him about finding time to get him in for that deeper dive. Your agendas are starting to fill up.
Yeah, that's why I thought, well, maybe we should stick it into the Aspen meeting, and since it looked like,
If we keep the presentation short, we could crank a lot. We could have an executive meeting. How about that?
Well,
We have 2 hours for
we
one
used
part,
to, we did
interstaff,
used to
and
do
the
Eight
other
that.
topics in 2 hours. Let's crank through this.
That's-
No chit chat. Let's just get him.
Yeah, you all
Maybe
asked
that
for
would
more
be
time to
useful.
talk.
elected officials and no chit chat. No,
It's like, you know, it's like, hey, that's what
do you
executive
see it
boards do.
possible to add Matthew into this?
I can ask him maybe short notice at this point.
2 hours.
And that's it?
But it's 2 hours. I do think by the time we have discussion on the airport and wildfire, we're gonna find it's pretty limited time. With 10 of you there.
Nancy's hopeful.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, okay. So I sent you.
I just don't want to shortchange the time from APSHA because I think there's a lot, I do think there's a decent amount of information this board would be interested in hearing related to, who's applying for and winning lotteries, how's the right sizing program working, what does the compliance program look like, how is our grant program for repairs? So I don't want us to give 15 minutes to a conversation that maybe needs 45.
He is terse in his presentations, which is helpful, but, so do you want to pursue that or not?
I think it would be worth at the roundtable to ask the city how they would like to proceed with having a joint presentation on APSHA. So at least opening up that conversation at the joint meeting on next week.
Okay, I'm okay with that. Do you have other things for us, John?
I do not.
Okay, well, I do. On October 3rd, Mike Lowe is going to come in. I just sent you some of his documentation that I finally got, John. And I think you know his father had died, so that's why we didn't get it earlier. Remember him?
What's the group called?
Epic.
Epic.
And it's partially funded by CoVenture, which is the organization in Carbondale, he and Tyler Mabius, and it's a business support, encouragement, and I'm not sure exactly what they do, but they're right across from Family. Anyway, so he is ready now to come to us, and the ask has gotten smaller, which is good. And Greg, I did check in with him about whether or not there was a time that we had to get that done by in September for it to be part of the matching thing that he had talked to us about at that meeting in Carbondale.
I vaguely remember it.
But when I told him that we couldn't really get him on the agenda till October 3rd, he was great, I'll be there. So
October 3rd, what
So-
is he's asking us for money?
he's asking us for money. It's
Workforce
it's more than
development.
like going through the grant.
The Healthy Community Fund?
Yes, thank you.
Which is where we direct people to.
Yeah, it's a bigger ask than that. So he does have a letter to the commissioners, and do you want to send that on to the commissioners?
I have no
that
idea
sent you,
who-
John?
Yeah, and I'm just kind of wondering how we want to handle, there's so many requests coming into you guys right now. So we have the BOCC's one, there's one that we're trying to get
This
more.
is BOCC's.
Right, this is
Right.
BOCC's.
Which
Lift Up, I
is-
think,
what's
is
the
looking
acronym
at
again?
coming in. Mind Springs has sent a letter to the sheriff, and I just want to be sure that y'all have an opportunity to see these in context.
Together.
We have
I mean,
a
it's-
full agenda on the 3rd, it looks like
I was
already.
busy, right?
Just heads up.
So, yeah, Kara had tried to set something up with him, and then, like I say, his father died,
Yeah,
and he went
yeah,
off the grid.
right, right.
So this was where we could get it in when I worked with Rich on it, and Kara had already left. It's kind of her, she's had more, she had more contact with him. So, I don't know, I mean,
So I think the first discussion is, right now, Francie, the correspondence that I think that just all happened today, right?
oh, I
for
got
him
it,
coming in.
well, I got it while you were gone.
Oh, okay.
I got the first one, and then he said there was a letter, but it turned out it was going to my junk mail. I have no idea why it went there, but, so I finally found it.
And so right now, the future agenda discussion for the board is having him come in on the 3rd. It would be for an ask. They have a capital campaign going on right now, from what I can understand, where Capital Ventures basically is matching a certain amount of dollars, or up to a certain amount of dollars raised. And so they have a gap right now. and are asking, Garfield County has made a commitment, and so they're coming to Pickton County to ask for a portion of that gap.
Fill the gap.
Yeah,
I think Garfield made a pretty big commitment, 100,000, right?
I think they made 100,000,
And Glenwood did too.
and Glenwood did too. And I don't,
recall.
I couldn't tell if he was going to the city, but we typically have asked nonprofits to come in if they're asking for operating funds and such through the Healthy Community Fund, and we try and get that all consolidated and not have one-off requests coming to the board, because then you end up opening it up. What has happened is we do have these one-time either capital campaign or capital kind of requests coming in, like response and such, that typically aren't covered, particularly if they're for capital. I don't know exactly what the BOCC's requests. I haven't had time to go through the letters yet. The Healthy Community Fund typically does not provide capital, right? It's operating, and so capital requests have come to the board. We are in a position where we're starting to get a number of capital requests from partners, like it sounds like BOCC's Lift Up has another one, and Mine Springs, which we're really trying to sort out more information on those before they come to the board.
Those are significant asks.
Yeah, they're significant. They're significant asks. Whether that's where the board goes with it is going to be another, conversation. But I just want to be sure that that these capital requests are also going to be lining up. And so if we do this on the 3rd, and as you're looking at making these commitments, just know there's more out there, and
Right.
and we're still coming up on our budget cycle. So. But I think
does
the first
BOCC
thing is to have the conversation about, October 3rd.
Can somebody answer my question? What is
I'm
it?
sorry.
What does BOCC stand for?
Oh, BOCC is I just read what BOCC stand for. It actually comes from EPIC itself. The letter comes from Michael via CoVenture, because they're gonna.
I have no idea who EPIC or CoVenture
Yeah.
are.
EPIC is the program that is the pathway to jobs for high school students.
Okay.
And BOCES is the Board of Cooperative Educational Services.
Okay. Those are the vans you see driving around with BOCC's written on the side of them.
Yeah, and those are they're mostly supplemental resources for kids with identified problems.
Right.
And Yampa is a BOCC school. It's the only BOCC school
That's
in the valley.
Yeah.
And it's Colorado BOCC's. It used to be River BOCC's, Mountain BOCC's. It used to be
Yeah.
Mountain BOCC's, and now it's River BOCC's.
It's Colorado River Board of Cooperative Education Services.
And Yampa is school is when? Doesn't your daughter-in-law, daughter?
My daughter worked
Works
there
at
for
Yampa.
quite a while. She's not there this year. Anyway, I'm not quite sure what you're saying, John.
All I'm saying is that first the board needs to, schedule having this presentation on the 3rd, and then we probably need to be thinking about if we're going to allow that, also the additional capital asks, and trying to get those in so you can
Like
kind of
Lift
see
Up.
that picture.
A Lift Up, and we've got
And what's the other one? Oh, Mine Springs, you said?
Mine Springs. Lift Up is $1 million something?
I thought we already
possibly?
supported Mine Springs, don't we?
We do. This is a capital ask. And again, I've got a ton of questions out, I think, to both entities right now that I'm hoping we can get sorted out before it comes in front of you, just so you have a full picture. But I don't have those from either of the organizations yet.
So what you're considering is having EPIC come in, having Lift Up come in, and having Mine Springs come in, so they're on equal footing?
Yeah, just so you don't have
And
them
they're all
stacked.
capital requests of some kind or another, capital campaign.
And they're all coming in right ahead of your budget. Yeah, that's going to be the
And we
challenge.
don't know, my question would be then, Francie, we don't know then, when all of our other nonprofits see this, who's gonna come forward next? with the capital, knowing that we don't usually fund capital, and asking us for that. My
I
concern
thought we
is
didn't fund operational through.
our Healthy
the
Rivers,
fund.
no, I mean our,
Healthy.
Sorry, we're all getting tired.
no, our Healthy Community Fund sponsors helps with operating, not capital.
Correct, correct.
We have capital requests coming in. My concern is not that these might not be valid requests. My concern is piecemealing it and not seeing a whole picture before we start spending.
Well, that's why I think John wants to.
Yeah.
be
Yeah,
involved.
that's all I'm trying to flag for
Yeah.
you right now, yeah.
So, should he come in for this?
I
Well,
don't see any time.
I think it's fine, I just wanted the board to understand that context. You may not want to make a decision on the 3rd. If you want to use the
Just
3rd
wait
as an
for BC.
opportunity to get information, and then
Okay.
we can try and schedule the other 2 and then bring all those requests to
The
you.
third agenda's full.
It's a Tuesday anyway,
full,
so, I
yeah.
mean, wouldn't it have to come back to us in some official capacity?
It would, but
Yeah.
I don't see time on the 3rd.
The 3rd right now, we have exec, and I don't know if we have this much exec or not this far in advance, but we are scheduled from 10:15 till noon. We may be able to grab a little bit of that time in the morning, late
And
morning,
we go to 5:25.
and
To do
then,
future agendas and open discussion or something like that?
yeah. And and this already has Epic on there.
Yeah,
So
it's
you
on
must
there.
have talked to
We're
them.
not-
Oh,
That's
I was
already
already
on
on
there.
that, yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't see that on the 3rd. Thanks, Francie.
Well, I think we just need to remember we've got hours and hours and hours of budget on our work sessions coming up. So,
And it may be this is something that we'll need to set aside some time during budget for you all. If
from the
that's
other two.
not too late, that way you can put it into a much broader
Sounds
context.
good.
Yeah.
So I'll tell Mike that we're not intending to make a decision on that day.
Yeah, I think that if
Okay.
that's up to the board. I mean, you all can make that decision. I just wanted to flag for you
Yeah.
these other issues.
information,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, Kelly?
Yeah. Should we also be considering these requests against our own capital program needs?
Yeah, I mean, all of these would be, unless you change some of your ARPA fund priorities, all of these would be coming out of the general fund. And so they will be competing directly with our other priorities. And that's why, just because of the size of the ask coming in, I just wanted to flag all that for you. So yeah, Kelly, I think maybe I'm being too subtle in that, but that's what I'm saying is,
Yeah, no, I get
yeah,
that.
yeah.
I think we all get that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whatever we give to somebody else, we don't
Yeah.
have to do.
like I said the other
our
day,
own
they're
projects.
lining up outside their door, and we better be prepared for it because it's just the nature of the beast these days. But I think when we do our budget priority retreat, or when we're doing our budget retreat,
Week
Yeah.
from
we need to
today.
talk about this and what we really want to be focused on, rather than the capital expenditures we need within the county to sustain the county as an operating public service, and what we would like to be doing for others, which we feel, it's hard to say no to some of these. I know it's hard, but we've got to make these hard and tough choices, and we have got to stick behind the decisions that we make.
Okay, I think we're done with future agendas. Anybody else have
I just
anything
had
for
one
future
quick,
agendas?
I wasn't gonna bring it up, and I'm really quickly, on the 26th, I had mentioned last week that I have an ACRA meeting that I'm going to attend, and somehow we've got executive session now scheduled at 8:30 that morning, which is two very important topics, and I will not be able to attend those, nor, we've got, short-term rentals at 10, and the ACRA meeting runs from about 8, it starts at 8:30 and runs up till about 10:30, so,
September 26th.
yeah. And I mentioned that last week, and somehow these other execs got scheduled, and I will try and follow up with staff who presented the issues, because I will not be able to attend the meetings, and I know we've reached out to, Charlotte and I have talked about the fact we need to reserve those Tuesday mornings, the end of the month, for my ACRA meetings, like we did for Michael Owsley when he was on the ACRA board.
Then we're gonna have to reschedule when we do exec session, because we have to have
We never used to do exec sessions every Tuesday. This
No,
is-
they're the second and fourth Tuesdays of the month. That's what Rye told me.
Well,
We don't have them every Tuesday by any means.
there,
We didn't have
there's
it today.
space reserved on every Tuesday work session.
Yeah, what we've typically done on those ACRA days is start the exec later, around 11, I think, because of the budget and how packed our agendas are getting. This got moved up to 8:30, which is really unusual.
And I'm gonna miss those two very important discussions, which I'm bummed
We
about.
could change the whole day and do exec session later.
No,
Well, we have to go to Twin Lakes that day. Never mind.
Yeah. Can we do exec session in the car on the way over? It gives us 2 hours. No, I just wanted the board to know I will not be at exec session, but I will follow up with the staff who does the presentations to try and gain at least some insight into the
You
discussion.
go 8:30 to 10?
8:30 to 10, 10:30 usually.
That's why I usually start at 11. It's just we're getting jammed. Yeah.
So, just a heads up.
Okay.
Hopefully you'll have a quorum.
That's a pretty long exec session. I guess it's the growth committee prep.
And I
Yeah,
think
those
that-
are pretty meaty conversations.
Okay. Anything else? Let's go to board open discussion.
I don't have any items for you. I'm still on reentry.
Anybody else?
Discussion about airport updates. What's happening with airport is a question that's been on my mind, and I know others have thought about it as well. It's like, where are we, and when are we going to hear about the conversations with FAA, and how are the lobbyists doing, and all those sort of questions?
Yeah, so we're going to be scheduling time to bring the group back in to kind of talk to you about some strategies. I think the attorney's office is looking at doing some of that under negotiations, and I think when John's back, I'll be getting those dates. We had talked about that before
Is
he
John
left.
out?
He's back. He's
Oh,
here tomorrow.
okay. Well, I was gone, I guess, too. So,
And back this last week.
yeah, so John and I haven't communicated on that. The rest of the FAA kind of conversations, Greg, I think are really going to be taking place almost iteratively through the ALP process. So, you know, we did submit the forecast as part of that process. And now we work on preparing the documents pursuant to really using the vision committee layout as a basis. Now there's some more work that needs to be done on that to formalize it with measurements and such. We will get feedback from the FAA in the process as far as what kind of concerns they have, what potential compromises we might be asked to make that we then bring back through the AAB and the board. And so that's going to be a process that really unfolds over the next year or so. And so right now, the conversation is about preparing that first submission with the vision committee's recommendations, using the board's resolution as a basis, and then seeing what conversations come back. I would anticipate we'll have some immediate conversations around the tower relocation. We'll probably have some conversations around midfield crossing, and is that going to be acceptable to air traffic control? We've gotten different messages, frankly, on that. We may have some conversations about the west side. And so as that evolves, we'll be bringing those back and having those conversations with the Airport Advisory Board and this board.
And so we'll be able to see when a compromise is either proposed or mandated or we're gonna get a good look at that.
Yeah,
as they come.
and typically what we do is we try and advocate for the position that the community has put out there, and if we're successful, that's great. If the FAA is really pushing back, then that's where we get into, hey, this is what we're being, this is where the agency is at in terms of approvals and such, and that's what we'd be bringing back to both the AAB and the board as we go through. It'll be an iterative, like I said, you're going to see, I almost hate to tell you this given our previous, but you're going to see during the airport layout plan process probably different versions several times before we settle on one that we think is acceptable to the AAB and this board and the FAA.
Right. I think as this proceeds, I think it would be really useful. We still have so many concerns in the community, some of which are legitimate because they don't know what's going on. Others maybe perhaps because they don't quite understand the situation and who does, right, completely. I would like to see a timeline developed where we can really look at the alternatives that have been proposed, or at least where we know it's going, not just for changes we might have with the tower or the way the decision process is going, but what will the effects of what we're doing actually be on the community in terms of the things people are concerned about: air pollution, safety, traffic density or traffic volume, the noise issues, the things we hear about, because I think we have a strange argument in the community, as we've seen, where there seems to be an argument to do nothing, which basically guarantees that it's only going to get worse. But doing something may not necessarily, again, guarantee that it gets better. In fact, it might get worse before it gets better. But I'm trying to figure out what a timeline for that would look like. Maybe it's something I need to do.
A timeline for what exactly?
The way our airport evolves for the next 12 years or whatever it's going to take.
Yeah, I think what Greg is asking for, if I can feedback and just see if
Sure.
I'm understanding, isn't necessarily a timeline for the ALP project. I think it's a timeline of, hey,
quality of life.
If changes are made, so let's say changes are made to the airfield over the next 7 to 10 years, then what we could probably do, Greg, and I think this is what you're asking for, is based on how we project new aircraft to utilize over what time frame, what are the noise emissions kind of profiles based on the number of operations, and what is the change that we would expect to see. And so I think what Greg is looking for, a really different timeline, which is probably like a 20-year timeline.
But how do we do that if we don't have an ALP that we know we're moving with? That would be my conundrum. How do we know when these changes are going, when we're not really sure which plan we're going with yet?
Well, I think that it's actually, there may be more value in looking at it in more general terms. We don't know precisely what the ALP is, but we have all these predictions on how quickly a new generation of aircraft will get here.
Yeah.
And then you overlay that with the predictions on how quickly the old aircraft will be discarded in favor of new aircraft, because some people are going to fly the old, dirty, noisy,
forecast.
smelly ones as long as they can, right? Until it just simply, they don't fly anymore, right? Until somebody tells them they can't fly them anymore.
But
So we're not going to be getting rid of the noisy, dirty aircraft anytime soon, is my point. But it'd be nice to see what that overlap looks like, so we can really look at the evolution of air travel and how it fits into what we're trying to do.
Oh, I thought you were talking about doing something with the public.
Yeah, this would be for the public. So when they come in and they say, don't change anything, then we'll say, okay, what that means is this is what's going to be happening, you know.
And so during the visioning process, I think we did something similar. Maybe the timeline has some challenges, right? Because any forecast
It's
is
always-
based on
it's always an
assumptions,
estimate,
and then the
right.
assumptions are bound to be wrong at some
Right, it's
some
all based
level.
on assumptions, but
But
we've
I
been getting
think
a lot of those.
What we did do was we have data right now on emissions and noise for the aircraft that at least that have been certified, right? We don't have them for the speculative aircraft of the future that will be different. We don't have that. But for a A220, for example, or an Embraer 175, we've got that noise and emissions profile. And so on the commercial side, I think what you're asking for is
That'd be
pretty
pretty
easy.
Right.
The GA side is going to be really hard, I think, to project, but we could, based on some assumptions, I think what Greg's asking for is, hey, based on a mix, a forecast mix at a point in time, 2040, what do emissions look like? What do noise profiles look like compared to 2020 if
That's
we
what you're
make
saying?
these changes?
I think we also would want to have an idea of what.
Is that it?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
good, yeah. it's
Because
close.
we have the forecast of what the GA planes are
Right.
gonna look like now and in 2040. We have that.
Right, but does that mean there isn't going to be some wildcatter out there who's still flying CRJs in here because they can make a
Well,
buck
no,
doing
but
it?
what do we do with that information? Do we say to the public, well, there may be somebody flying in here and putting
Yes,
out-
we do tell them that, because right now, they're going on the assumption that if we follow, you know, an alternative path, we're gonna have much cleaner, quieter, and the problems will be solved, when the fact is, I don't think that's accurate, and so.
I haven't heard anybody say that. I hear what
Well, I'm
people
not
saying
gonna
the
argue with you
opposite.
about it. What we've heard is, people are so concerned with the modifications we're making to the airport that it's going to be worse, right? We're gonna have dirtier, noisier.
that's what I've
going
heard.
forward, right. But perhaps the opposite is true, right?
The bottom line is, nobody's
So-
going to agree with us anyway.
Well, they, perhaps, but it'd
They're
be
going to
nice
say,
to.
oh, no, your forecast of when those new planes are coming in is off, and this.
Maybe this is something I need to do on my own, and I'll just share it with you when I've got it.
Well, maybe
But-
you could fine tune it, then we could have a better understanding of what you're
And
asking for.
The fact is, what really is going to change is probably different from what people are either afraid of or anticipating is changing. And that's what I'm trying to get to.
Yeah,
What's
it's
really going to
squishy
change.
though. I can't get my hands on what.
Okay,
So,
well, I'll
would
just
you,
share
are
it with
we
you.
gonna publish something or have a
Maybe
meeting?
so,
or-
yeah, maybe I'll make a giant poster and I'll
We're gonna have
plaster
a
it on the
meeting.
wall.
With what?
Glue.
What's gonna be,
Or maybe
what
tape.
information is gonna be on the poster?
Well, I'm trying to explain that. I'm not getting through.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean,
so-
when I read about what the forecast is, but it's only for commercial, I mean, there is
Right,
some for
right.
GA, but
Oh, geez.
it's definitely about newer airplanes are gonna have fewer emissions, they're gonna, all that stuff. But as you're saying, there's still gonna be other airplanes flying, especially private airplanes for a long time, but doesn't
And
everybody know
there's-
that? I mean, what are you saying?
I'm not going to assume anybody knows anything, because so much conjecture and conflation and gaslighting and obfuscation has been put out there that I don't think. I
Did
think we
anybody
have
just
real
get a call from
communications
North
problem.
I don't
Carolina?
feel,
Hello, Kelly wants to talk.
I don't feel like I've ever gotten an answer to my question related to how the market for general aviation aircraft works.
That's a good question. So that would help. That would help inform me.
You know, in addition to that, I think we have a different market for air taxis, which probably works even differently. That is relevant for these conversations.
I guess I'm going to try to do more forecasting, and I'll see how I get.
I'd be really cautious about putting out a forecast. Like,
You should have given him that postcard from Scotland. In Scotland, they have a forecaster, and it's a rock tied to a rope, and you swing it at a
Swing it
board.
right.
And wherever it hits is your forecast.
There
I
you
brought a
go.
postcard home for Ridge and
Maybe
one
that's
for
accurate.
Dan. Did anybody get a call from Winston-Salem?
Yeah, that's going to be Signature is making calls about,
Not extending the FBO contract for tomorrow.
and I will
What
be
is
giving.
Winston-Salem?
I will be giving.
Winston-Salem.
I will be giving him a call
Am I
after our
calling him to be
meeting.
sending you a letter?
What's his name?
No, it's a place
It's
it's
like a
coming
lobbying
from.
effort or something. Oh.
He's
No, I
he's
didn't
submitting a letter objecting to
participate
us
in that?
extending the contract for Atlanta.
Yes, I don't, do I?
I don't think I got that. They just come in?
It just came in.
Good.
I haven't seen the letter, I just got a phone call. He liked my answering machine message.
Oh.
That's so funny how many people love that message.
I think we're done. Unless somebody else has something they want to talk about. Anybody else? Going, we're done. We're adjourned.
Thanks.
Thank
Greg,
you, Rosa
Greg,
and
it'll give
Dora.
you something to do now that you don't have children at home.